I am the ambassador. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Diego Brasioli. I am the I am the ambassador of Italy in the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, and I wish to give you a virtual welcome to this important workshop on webinar mode. Some of you, I know you're all experts, but some of you might wonder why Luxembourg, such a tiny, small country in Central Europe. Very briefly, Luxembourg is a country that is investing a lot in new technology and space technology. It's a country that has already a very good tradition, established tradition of space technology through satellites. And since a few years, it has become a very important country in Europe as far as the employment of resources in outer space, and in particular on the moon and satellites, and in perspective to Mars is concerned. We will hear from representatives from the ESRIC what they do in this field. And let me remind you that Luxembourg and Italy are the only two European Union countries that have formally signed an agreement with the NASA, with the American Space Agency, to contribute to the Artemis program, which is the program, as you know, that is going to bring back on the moon human beings in a few years. Today we talk about a very interesting project developed by students of Politecnico di Bari under the guidance of Professor Fallacara, which I welcome and thank very much for his cooperation in this, in cooperation with Politecnico di Torino and Politecnico di Milano, Houston University, and other research centers. Mars architecture is something that sounds and looks very futuristic, but the future is right before us. And the technology is proceeding very, very in a very advanced and quick way. And this is why this project is particularly relevant. It's the first project of the kind about space architecture, specifically on Mars, discussed in Italy. And I'm really very glad that we're able today to devote a little bit of our attention to this. A very good friend of ours, Dr. Gerardo Pelosi, a journalist from Sole 24 Ore, is an expert on international relations and in particular on space issues, is with us. He's about to leave for a mission abroad, and I thank him very much for taking his time to be with us. And I think he's the most appropriate person to give us an overview of the situation of the panorama of space exploration in those days, and in particular of the Italian endeavor and the Italian engagement in this. So without further delay, may I ask Dr. Gerardo Pelosi to make his intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your nice words. And I would like just make some comments and give you some information about the commitment, the Italian commitment for this specific field. But let me say, first of all, to give you a particular comment about a few days ago. I have the opportunity to visit in Biennale of Venice, the 17th International Architecture Exhibition. And in this exhibition, there was an installation from a very important study, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, and they give us an installation about the life beyond Earth, and the installation encompasses two large scale physical models and a film that bring a biennale visitor on a journey from Earth to the Moon's surface. This installation was the concept about, by retired NASA astronaut Jeffrey Hoffman. Now he's a professor of MIT Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics. It's a very important view, in a very fun view about what will be our life in the next decades. Life beyond Earth represents a paradigm shift in space architecture and offers insight discovered through international cross-sector cooperation. But it's only a view for what we'll have to see in the next future.
Io non ho più audio.
Non riesco più a sentire.
Anch'io non sento più.
Yeah, exactly. Gerardo, sorry, you have some kind of problem with your microphone. Please try to check your microphone. It doesn't work.
Credo che devo provare a uscire. Ecco.
Can you hear now?
Yes,
Yeah,
now yes.
Yes, okay. And what's the Europe's space strategy? I give you some comments of Europe's space strategy and the Italian commitment. As you know, in the 2019, the European space budget was the total amount was 9.3 billion, 7.8 billion from national budget and 1.5 from EU budget. The figures are still modest when compared with the other great powers in the world. European institutional demand is 6 times smaller than the US or Russian equivalent, and about 4.5 times less than China's. However, the European space economy, including manufacturing and services, employs over 230,000 professionals, and its value represents around 21% of the value of the global space sector. This is some figures for the European commitment. And what about Italy? As you know, Italy represent worldwide excellence in the space sector, in all the field of the space. The Italian space industry is ranked the 3rd in Europe and 7th globally. As you know, the Sevilla ministerial meeting in 2019 described the Italian contribution of the space in the European ESA. We are the 3rd contribution. So in terms of budget, Italy represents 2.3 billion every year. The leading role of Italy in the space sector dates from 1960, when it became the 3rd country in history after the USA and Russia to launch a satellite into space, the San Marco, when the chairman of the CNA, the Italian Research Center, was Mr. Brosio. A San Marco satellite from led from the Malindi base. Also, it is thanks to Italy in Europe managed to see the first moon landing in 1969 due to the Italian Telespazio antennas in the Fucino plain in Abruzzo. 50 years later, with a total turnover of almost 2 billion and more than 200 companies in the sector, the space economy represents a clear priority for Italy. Among these companies, Thales Alenia Space Italy, together with Altec and the Italian Space Agency, ESA-ESRIC, play a leading role in the upstream space sector, which leads with the construction of satellites, technologies, and robots for Earth observation, security, and exploration of the solar system, as well as with the launches into orbit led by the Italian Avio with the launcher Vega. The downstream sector, which leads with the management of satellites and ground services and the collection and the distribution of data, instead sees as leaders Telespazio and Leonardo, representing national champions recognized globally. And as you know, the Undersecretary of the government, Bruno Tabacci, is in charge of he has the delegate for the aerospatial sector. And from the last speech of Mr. Tabacci, we know that all the financial resources for the space are 2.3 billion of euro, 1.49 for the national recovery and resilience national plan. It's the next generation EU, the amount for the Italy of the next generation, and the rest for the complementary fund. And as you know, the total amount for the Italian is finalized in order to achieve some very important result. The satellite, like SATCOM, Earth observation, and space factory, creation of integration line of a production for a small satellite in Italy, and access of technologies in the space. And last but not least, I would give some comments about the participation of the Italy to the Expo 2020 in Dubai. As you know, there will be in this Expo also a particular focus on the space. The name is Space Connect People, is the title of this event. The Italy Pavilion and ASI want to establish a cultural and scientific cooperation on the subject of space and aerospace, with a special focus on Earth observation system and their spillover effect on their environmental sustainability. The agreement outlines initiative to be taken during the 6-month expo that is scheduled to kick off on the 1st of October, with ASI also participating through the presence of young researchers and at international event organized by Expo Dubai and other participating countries. The Italian pavilion will become a hub for the exchange of knowledge and for competence building through the promotion of innovative training models to be shared to the on international scenario that is offered by Universal Expo. And that's it. I hope my few words will help to introduce your workshop, and I thank you, the ambassador, and everybody. Thank you, Ambassador Brasioli.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pelosi, also for your time, and we wish you a good and safe mission abroad. You know, we know that you're leaving now in a few moments. And now it's a great pleasure to welcome for some welcome addresses. First of all, the magnifico Rettore of Politecnico di Bari, Professore Francesco Cupertino. Professore, prego.
Sorry, Ambassador, excuse me. I kindly ask if the next could be Professor and Rettore Saracco, because he has a lot of commitments, and
of course.
No.
If Professor Cupertino is the same.
Yeah, okay. Francesco,
sorry.
I would never do this. They know that I have to pick up my daughter at school, and so I have to rush. But thank you, Francesco, and sorry for this. I'm very happy about what is happening today, and it's going to be a long story, but it's not just in the future, and maybe 20 or 30 years time to see this in practice. It's an interdisciplinary playground that is going to help a lot also in the education that we are doing, or with students team from different kinds of engineering, and maybe also social and human sciences working together on building something here on Earth that will resemble what is going to happen on Mars or on the moon and so forth. It's really exciting. It's changing paradigms in manufacturing, in combining energy, mass balances, structural behavior, and so that we are deeply involved in this. It's not just dreaming, it's something very real nowadays, and it's going to help a lot of students to become better engineers in our faculties. So with these few words, I hope the best success for your meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Professor Saracco. And now to Professor Francesco Cupertino, magnifico Rettore Politecnico di Bari. Professore, prego.
Grazie. Thank you, Ambassador Brasioli. First of all, I would like to thank you for your interest in this topic, in the activities, the research activities we are carrying out at Politecnico di Bari. Let me also greet Guido Saracco and also Giuseppe Sala, all the colleagues from universities, space agencies, and industry that will give value to this afternoon meeting. When we talk about space architecture, many ask me, what is space architecture? This is a frequent question that I often been asked here in Bari. Every time we organize something around the topic of space architecture, we manage to attract the attention of newspaper, TVs, social media, and every time always arises the same question: the need to define the space architecture. The answer to this question is not simple at all. If architecture is the art of creating useful spaces for human needs, space architecture is an open door to the future needs of humanity, in a context that is barely predictable. Can we ask if we are therefore debating about utopias? I believe not, because extraordinary achievements are reached also because of strong motivations. And we have very strong motivations. First of all, giving human beings another planet where to live in case planet Earth will be in a very far future, not more useful for human beings. A few years ago, in 1962, there was a president of the United States who gave a speech. It was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and he said that we have decided to go to the moon. How much determination in such words? Obviously, the context was different. We were in a period of the Cold War, and the competition between countries like the United States and Russia. Many things have changed since then. The globalization has replaced such kind of competition. Today we are asking ourselves if we have to look at new models to continue the development of business, of humanity above Earth. Even more now when we are facing the next phase of the pandemic. But even in such very, very different conditions, we feel that our objectives are similar to those of 1962. President Kennedy said that we have decided to go to the moon and also to do other things, not because they are simple, but because they are difficult. This is the sense of the challenge that is very significant in a world in which we have to manage epochal challenges, such as sustainable development, the energy transition, and also the expansion of human life on other planets. Space architecture makes us understand how useful it will be in the next years to have a multidisciplinary approach. Today, it is necessary to be open to changes and contamination between different areas and backgrounds. For this, when we talk with our students at university, we try to teach them not to eat them in the boundaries of a single discipline, not to settle into comfort zones. Space architecture is a perfect example of this new mentality. We have decided to go to Mars, and we will succeed. Maybe a new President Kennedy in the next few years will announce it, maybe from a university, as Kennedy did in 1962. In the meantime, our universities, the other Polytechnic universities in Italy, they are trying to keep up with the time. This is demonstrated by the increasing number of collaboration with experts from various several areas of the aerospace. We are trying to empower and carrying out nowadays. We will go to Mars with our engineers, with our architects, and who knows what other of professionals. But we will always remain in search, today as then, for new and greater challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Cupertino, magnifico. For sure, could be diplomats to engage in contacts with people, Martian people living on Mars. No, I'm joking, but it's definitely very wise what you said. It's not only building a base there, but building an environment fit for human beings and human life there. And now, without further delay, Professor Giuseppe Sala, the Director of the Department of Engineering, Aerospace Engineering in Politecnico di Milano. Professore, prego.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. It's a great honor for me, a pleasure to be here as a representative of Politecnico di Milano to lead all the attendees to this webinar on behalf of the Rector of Professor Ferruccio Resta. Politecnico di Milano, as Rector Cupertino said, is a university in Italy strongly committed to contribute to the study in general of space, and mainly for the development of approaches for a sustainable use of space resources. In particular, to the definition of rules enabling off-world construction, to assess efficient strategy for the use of in-situ resources. According to us, space architecture is a new discipline contributing to define sustainable use of resources enabled by sound technological assets and smart building solutions. Politecnico, as the other technical university in Italy, has a strong human forces devoted to this objective. Every year, more than 600 students, new students, enroll in aerospace engineering at Politecnico, and more than 150 new space engineers start working on this subject. Besides, there is a tight and effective networking and connection among the other polytechnics, the other technical university in Italy, Politecnico di Bari, Politecnico di Torino, as well as with the research centers, in Italian research centers. Beside tight connection with the Italian, with ASI, there is a framework cooperation of 15 years framework cooperation between the Italian Space Agency and Politecnico, and beside tight cooperation with the other national agencies like ESA, NASA, the Japan, the Russian, and the Chinese agency. Beside, a lot of work has been made and is going to be made with the Italian space company like Leonardo, Thales, OHB, Telespazio, Argotec, and so on. And finally, with the Italian Aerospace Technological Cluster. The work we are doing gives special attention to the topics indicated by the government strategic plan on the subject of space and aerospace, which have been implemented in the strategic document of national space politics issued by Italian Space Agency, as well by the national research plan by the Ministry of University and Research. And among all these themes, Earth observation, telecommunication, access to space, in-orbit servicing, tracking, docking, and robotics. The main focus at the moment for us is the moon, asteroids, planets, satellites, exploration, colonization, and in-situ use of resources, sustainable use of resources. For example, Mars or moon sand, the system to grow up vegetable in control greenhouses, and ways of building up shelters by additive manufacturing techniques and using self-healing materials. So all our commitment is toward this target, this objective, and I'm happy to see that our effort is going ahead with the cooperation of the other Italian technical university, as well as research center and boards.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I'm very glad that you stressed in your intervention the peculiar aspects of your common endeavor, which is also the peculiar aspect of this seminar today. I'm very glad because we have institutions, academics institutions. We have the governments being involved, ESRIC from Luxembourg, the University of Luxembourg, European Space Agency, the Italian Space Agency, but also industries participating. And I wish to thank them, OHB Italia, Argotec, Telespazio, TASI, Maana Electric, and so many others. You can count on our strong motivation. As you pointed out, The Italian government is fully behind this project. It's a strategic project, the one of space colonization and space exploration, on which the government is fully involved. And we are very glad that today, in cooperation with the Italian Trade Institute, following the guidelines of the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, the embassy in Luxembourg has been able to gather together you all. We will continue to follow up on this. And I wish to thank in this moment also my staff that has been in contact with you all. And as I said, unfortunately now I have to leave the meeting, but my colleagues continue to follow. And I will leave the task to moderate the rest of the interesting debate to Professor Fallacara, which I greet with a warm welcome again. Grazie, Professore.
Buonasera, good evening to everyone. We are perfectly in time. Bonsoir aux amis luxembourgeoises et à toutes les personnes connectées au webinaire. I would like to thank the Italian ambassador in Luxembourg, Diego Brasioli, for organizing the webinar. And I would like to thank to Marina Mancarella for the organization support. I would like to thank magnificent rectors and representatives of Italian polytechnics. And I would like to thank all the speakers of the seminar. I'm very happy that Gerardo Pelosi actually started with a focus on Biennale exposition about moon model, moon project that actually was developed also with Valentina Sumini. And we are happy to have Valentina with us this afternoon, and so she will explain us in a focused and important way all the detail about this project. Our organization of time today is scheduled with pressing written. Unfortunately, the only 30 minutes for the space agencies. So I will not dwell on it, and I give the floor to the space agencies that I thank for accepting the invitation. It's for me a great pleasure to introduce Engineer Massimo Sabatini, Erasmus Innovation Center Manager at the European Space Agency. So please, Massimo, it's your time now. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Massimo Sabatini. I want to thank the ambassador and all the eminent participants to this workshop. My contribution will be on an activity which is a bit on the side of architectural. It's rather an enabler of the architectures to come on, in particular to the moon. My project is called the Space Resources Challenge, and that's a cooperation we do with ESRIC of Luxembourg, with the European Space Resources Innovation Center in Luxembourg. So we started this recently, and we've had, first of all, I'd like to mention the role of prospecting. Prospecting is the activities you do on any terrain before you go in with the further exploration. Is the activity that allows you to select the landing site, is an activity that allows you to know if there is enough resources with which you could leave off the land, which is the next step. I mean, we've been to the moon before for pride, for other purposes. This time we go there to stay. And therefore we need to do it in a sustainable way. And to do it in a sustainable way, we need to find resources. Resources in the form of water and its components, oxygen and hydrogen, which we know now where ESRIC is strong in telling us or finding ways to extract the oxygen from the lunar regolith, from the sand. But we also need metals, and there's an abundance of metals on the moon. Certainly on the near side, we know of large amounts in the mares, but also the highlands are rich in other materials like aluminium. So we want to prospect before we explore. And that is an area where I come in with an approach which is innovation. So the European Space Agency together with the ESRIC of Luxembourg, chose an approach to solicit ideas, and not only paper ideas this time, but actually requesting a submission in coming to the Netherlands for the first phase in a field test. So a field test where we would ask companies to show their prototype, being it a rover, a number of rovers and drones cooperating, and to solve a problem, a concrete problem, which I will set up in a hangar, in a closed environment, covered environment, where we try to reproduce the illumination condition of the moon. We will do, so I had here some pictures, but I hear that the colleague of Giuseppe will present the SOM contribution to the Biennale di Venezia. And the so I had this slide we no longer need, but it is an endeavor where my colleagues, in particular from ESA headquarters, Piero Messina, was quite involved. He was an enabler of this initiative from SOM at the Biennale di Venezia. But back to so again, prospecting in a large area, and I mean, I've heard from experts that we probably know the moon more, and we've imaged the moon more than we actually do the Earth. We know pretty well where things are, but remote sensing, it doesn't tell you the full story. Without ground truth, you cannot go and decide where to drill and how much of the elements you're interested in there is. So before we do this, we need to create this ground truth. So my challenge is about soliciting solutions, technological solutions from industry, academia, and it's good that today there is a good representative of Italian academia, which I would love to see participating numerously at this initiative, with a proof of concept. So the goals of these initiatives are to identify the technologies that future ESA missions to the moon towards the end of this decade. I sound like Kennedy, but I'm not. But then towards the end of this decade, ESA will go back to the surface of the moon, will go to the surface of the moon. And we want to identify with this challenge the best approaches. Is it better to go with a big rover? Is it better to go with a swarm of little rovers? Can we use drones to help the cooperation between the two? So how do we find ground truth in an area which is a few kilometers square? So we still need the satellites to tell roughly where we want to go. We need the scientists that tell us the South Pole is better than the near side on the equatorial side, maybe not. But then we need to go in on a regional level. And this is where we need robotic exploration. Also, the other goal of this initiative is to create and engage the community around the space resources topic and theme. So the next, a few dates, which would come better with a slide, but I can't help that, and this is the key message of me today. If there are industries or academia interested to participate, we need a submission by the 31st of July of this year, a paper submission. The actual challenge will happen at the end of November, the last week of November in the Netherlands. I can't show you how it looks like, but imagine a hangar of 2,500 square meters, roughly divided into two areas: a navigational area where rovers have to show their capabilities to autonomously navigate, no compass, no GPS, just visual, just the cameras they have on the rover, and then reach a region of interest, which is with some simulant, but I use the word vague, very loosely. Don't want to commit that it's going to be like the regolith. It's going to be a terrain, a soil with 6 rocks, and the rovers have to tell me what is the composition of such rocks, because this is the task in the end we will have to undergo and to solve. Giuseppe, you'll tell me if I'm too long, but I now talk about maybe the interesting part, which is the money. The 5 winners of the November competition will receive 75,000 euros each, formulated as an ESA contract to develop the prototype further. The second field test will take place in Luxembourg, and we'll have in September-October 2022 one single winner, and this winner will receive 350,000 euros from Luxembourg and 200,000 from ESA to bring the technology readiness level of their solution to the next step, possibly to be flown to a mission to the moon before the end of the decade. Interested? Well, then here I need the text, but it's .int. I'll be more than happy to talk a bit more about this later, if and when I have a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Massimo. If you agree, we can add all your image to your speech after the final video in post-production in order to be clear what your word explained to us. So if you agree, we can do it after. Thank you so much. And now is the time of ASI, the Italian Space Agency. I give the floor to the engineer Danilo Rubini, head of the European Bilateral and Multilateral Relation Office of the Italian Space Agency. Please, Danilo.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to attend today this challenging event organized by the Italian Embassy of Luxembourg. As said, I'm Danilo Rubini, representative of the Italian Space Agency and responsible for bilateral and multilateral relations with European countries. First of all, let me thank His Excellency, the Italian Ambassador, who just left, Diego Brasioli, for the organization of the event and for the invitation. I would greet the authorities of Luxembourg, the rectors of the Italian Politecnics, together with their representatives, ESA and all the participants, including and not forgetting absolutely academia and industry. Finally, a special greet goes to ESRIC, the European Space Resources Innovation Center. With this center, Luxembourg involving, among the others, ESA is proposing a reference point for the future economic utilization of space. So, a bit more than 6 years ago, in March 2015, I participated to a workshop whose title was Towards the Use of Space Resources. The Luxembourgish Ministry of Economy, together with Lux Innovation, organized the event. 2 years later, in 2017, Luxembourg approved the law on the exploration and use of space resources, the first legal framework on space resource utilization in Europe. At the time of the said workshop, there were rather few players in this field, mainly designing phase 0 mission studies with, let's say, little hope of having these studies the possibility to become reality. Intense discussions were related mainly to the typology of institutional funds to be used for resource utilization, science budgets or economic development budgets. That was the question at the time. Today, only 6 years later, space resource utilization is much more a reality. We certainly could speak about new sources of financing for these activities. We certainly must analyze what has happened to the big picture of space activities in these 6 years. However, I'd like to highlight that among the various important perspectives, human exploration and living into space are becoming part of a growing shared perspective of the space community and the youth. So, talking about space architecture, as properly pointed out by Rector Cupertino, not system architecture, as often engineers have to deal with in space, is something that we need to consider because we are moving toward this reality. Today, research is looking for the specific conditions for a sustained exploration. In the past, it was just exploration. We are seeking for commercial scenarios, not only as main purpose of the mission, but to serve the commercial exploration. We are selecting through competitions in ESA, for instance, who's going to develop and provide the lunar Earth telecommunication broadband services. And some players already commercially offer some services of Mooncom. In Italy, even together with ESA and many other players, including players from Luxembourg, we are developing multiple different systems, subsystems, and technologies toward these new challenges. As we know, this does not come from nowhere. We did fundamental heritage in developing multiple crucial parts of the International Space Stations to the multiple solar system observation and exploration missions. Rosetta and its lander Philae, just to cite an example, thank you, Amalia. Italy has always kept and still today is providing a great attention to space exploration, in-situ resource utilization, life in space, and many fundamental building blocks for the future architectures that will define the space resource utilizations. Technologies like the ExoMars drill, the national developments on additive manufacturing in and for space, the past robotic arms, and the always more autonomous robotic systems, the closed loop systems for food, or the SED systems for lunar communications are just few examples. On another side, or let's say on another perspective, at national, like international level, Italian research teams often with new dedicated economic models are evaluating the sustainability of private markets for space resource utilization, analyzing the most appropriate kind of partnership, for instance, to shape these new markets. Lunar ice, mining the moon for minerals, production of goods like water, oxygen, or propellant are just some potential market domains. In addition, our national debate on the legal and regulatory framework for space resource utilization clearly highlights the need for an international dialogue in order to coordinate the free exploration and use of outer space, avoiding conflicts and competing claims. All these approaches, together with the needed international collaborations through a shared architecture, will provide the shape of the whole domain of space resources utilization. So finally, I thank Luxembourg for contributing to boost this domain and wish you all a fruitful webinar, recalling that TASI is available to evaluate, support, and encourage the bilateral cooperation in the belief that space is one of the driving elements of the wider bilateral cooperation between our two countries. Thank you again. And now I'd like to hand over to my colleagues from ASI for let's say, more technical perspective. First to Alessandro Gabrielli and then to Marco Di Clemente. Thank you again.
Thank you, Danilo. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to share a presentation. Hopefully, let me check. Can you hear it? Can you see the presentation as well?
Not
yet.
Now?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay, so robotic exploration and in-situ resources utilization. Okay, one of the main objectives of space exploration is to increase knowledge among scientists and researchers, and on the other side, to maintain a higher level of expertise and skill in industry. So more and more science and industry work in synergy in several missions, starting with the characterization of the harsh environments with a view to future habitability, and with the specific purpose of identifying first the local condition and the short-term or medium-term variation, and second the presence of resources or hazards to be considered in preparation of human mission of different duration. You have to consider also astrobiology, that is the branch dedicated to the identification of forms of life outside our planet, but also the maintenance of life in space environments, harsh environment. And today, the astrobiology is also considered a sector of science and research with a very close correlation with the future mission and the life science. Improve technology performance. So a massive use of existing technologies envisaged, and there is the need to develop or in particular increase the maturity of enabled technology, which could be of strategic national interest in order to guarantee the maintenance of the skill and the key role acquired by our industry over the past years. Enabling technologies span from autonomous GNC system, subsoil drilling, image recognition, deep space communication, to the challenges in situ resource utilization that my colleague Marco Di Clemente will be introducing later. Italy can boost an important contribution also in the traditional robotic sectors and in the development of parts of entire subsystems. So it is therefore essential to continue to support the existing mission, to encourage and build the participation to new upcoming programs with the traditional, but also with new partners, with focus on let me say, on innovation and developments that arise in the field of terrestrial robotics in order to favor possible technology transfers, so the so-called technology spinning. In order to play an active role in a very articulated and complex international panorama, ASI actively participates to international space fora, and in particular to the International Space Exploration Coordination Group, and also in the International Mars Exploration Working Group. By addressing the challenges related to the human space exploration, of course, we span technologies, we create a new industry, startups in particular, and we also have to foster a peaceful connection with the other nation. Curiosity and, let me say, exploration are vital to the human spirit, and so accepting the challenge of going deeper into space pushes us to inspire future generations to build up even more challenging targets in space exploration. Needless to say that the Moon, Mars, and also the asteroid exploration mission indeed take decades to be accomplished. So the turnover is almost physiological. So in this view graph, very quickly, I would like to introduce the Italian participation to space exploration. Also in the past, we started with research and experiments in international, the ISS, of course, in order to tackle all the first challenges of space exploration, robotic exploration in particular. And now we are approaching with new mission, robotic mission to the Moon, with the purpose of extracting or fetching materials and also to analyzing samples. and also to evaluate the condition for future settlement and infrastructure on the moon. At the same time, in parallel, so in the time frame of the next 5 years, we would like to accomplish also some demonstration missions on asteroids. And we follow, of course, in the next decade, human mission on the moon with a sustainable presence. And in order to do this, we need the exploitation of in-situ resources. Final goal, but not very final, but in the time frame of 2020 to 2035, robotic mission on Mars, starting with the characterization of the Earth environment on Mars, and with the installation of infrastructure on ground, on the surface of Mars. The most challenging part will be, of course, the Mars sample return mission. And also the entering, descent, and landing mission that we would like to accomplish also at very national level. So the very goal is the human sustainable presence on Mars. So these one are the planning of the activities, and the purpose, the main purpose is, of course, to create the economic opportunities, also in particular at the national level, to provide innovative technologies to be developed, and of course increase knowledge. So these are the main high-level objective of the space exploration. Okay, here just a quick panorama of the mission that we have performed in the past, of course, in partnership with the other countries and the National Space Agency, but also with ESA, of course. Now we are focused on the following mission of the ExoMars, Rosalind. Of course, we are interacting with NASA for the DART mission and the well-known Artemis mission. We are focused on the future mission that will take place in 2020, starting in 2024, 2031 for the Mars sample return, as I said. And just today, we have to say that TASI is fully involved in the Phase A mission, that is the Mars Ice Mapper, that is devoted to the mapping of the water in form of ice, in particular underneath the surface of Mars. And this is the mission that will open up the human exploration of Mars. Of course, the target is always to follow the water, but also includes the search or the investigation of the capability to explore the habitability of Moon and Mars, and also to focus the possibility to seek sign of life on Mars itself. Now I give the floor to my colleague Marco Di Clemente for the next chart. Thank you.
Thank you, Alessandro, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for this invitation to this talk of this afternoon. So very quickly, since some points has been already addressed by previous speaker, I would like to announce what are the enabling technologies that we will need to develop for space exploration. And in particular, so the field in which the Italian Space Agency is active in this period and will be active in the near future. First of all, we think that there is a need to upgrade communication system in order to upgrade the traditional system that are currently used. And this can be done also with the use of, for example, small satellites or a new system, for example, regarding optical communication, even to increase performances. Regarding the mobility, of course, this can be improved with the use of rovers and drones, that, of course, require the need to develop, for example, autonomous GNC capabilities with the use of artificial intelligence that can be, of course, an enabling technologies for this kind of operation that shall be done on surface of different planets. And also the use of the development of robotics can, of course, give a big help in handling, for example, local resources through the use of drill and sampling systems. For what concerns the support to human exploration activities, there is a need, and we are working on this, to realize tools, for example, and infrastructure for in order to consider permanent settlements of human astronauts on different planets. And this, of course, can be done through the use of robotic systems in order to enable surface operations. And at the same time, there is a need to even to research some countermeasures for in order to reduce the risk factors of human life on other planets. Some attention, specific attention, is also placed to what is called planetary analogues sites, in particular what is available on the national perimeter, in order to develop facilities, a simulation environment able to be used to test and validate the technologies that are being developed in a representative environments. And of course, in this for this purpose, there is an attention to this kind of facilities already available in the national territory in Italy. Next slide, please. Thank you. More specifically, speaking of in-situ research utilization, there are some specific needs to be addressed, in particular for what concern the acquisition, preparation, and classification of resources that can be found in different planets. And this, of course, could be done through the use of robotic systems, but there is also a need for to develop autonomous capabilities for resources recognition and classification. The technologies for the production of consumables that can be found in situ. We are speaking of water, oxygen, propellants, maybe, in order, of course, to reduce the what is needed to take from Earth. Of course, there will be a need for a power generation and storage, and regarding the local and the in-situ manufacturing, there will be a need for technologies able to allow materials handling, the preparation, starting from the preparation of powder for manufacturing, but also the capability and the development of processes for in-situ to be used in situ, so in a different environment respect to the Earth, and also capabilities for post-processing of these building blocks. To this purpose, specifically for what concerns in-situ research utilization, very quickly, just to next one, please, just to inform the community that the Italian Space Agency is working in the organization of a workshop that will be specifically devoted and that will address what is ongoing in a national level regarding the technology or research activities for in-situ resources utilization. This will be organized in September. So we are working on the final definition of the program, and who is interested can contact me or Alessandro. But please keep also attention to the website of ASI when the announcement will be published in the coming weeks. I think this was the last slide of our talk. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thanks so much for such detailed presentation to ESA Italian Space Agency. I would thank the engineers Danilo Rubini, Marco Di Clemente, Alessandro Gabrielli. Right now, let me introduce Matthias Link, Director for International Affairs and Space Resources at Luxembourg Space Agency. Matthias, right now you are allowed to present. Thank you. The microphone, please.
Yes. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. So I'm trying to share my screen as well. Not sure if that's possible. Can you see it already?
Yes,
or?
yes, it's okay.
Yes, yes, it's perfect.
Okay, but I cannot see it. That's strange. Okay. So now you see it, right? Ah, okay. Like this it works, or?
We can perfectly see your screen.
Like this?
Yes.
You see the full slide, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. So, yeah. First of all, I would also like to thank the ambassador Diego Brasioli for organizing this together with the organizers, and thank all the participants. Very interesting so far to hear about the different plans in Italy, and specifically on space resources and space architecture. So I have prepared a few slides on space resources in Luxembourg. A lot of it has been mentioned already, so it will maybe be, I will maybe try to go fast on certain elements. So I will both present spaceresources.lu, which is an initiative that we launched in 2016 on space resource utilization. And then I will have a slide on a few slides on ESRIC, which was also mentioned already. So first of all, on spaceresources.lu, so this is an initiative that we launched in 2016 with the aim to contribute to the peaceful exploration and sustainable utilization of space resources for the benefit of humankind. And usually I explain what space resource utilization is, but that was already very well explained by both ASI and ESA. So I will skip that. But I guess what is interesting here is to show you a bit how we approach this topic, because obviously it is a very complex one with a lot of different challenges to solve, both technical challenges and financial challenges, but also economical and legal challenges. And so what we did since a few years now is that we developed a strategy to address all these challenges at the same time and trying to move forward step by step. And you see here the 5 pillars that we have addressed in these last 5 years, addressing the political level, the legal and regulatory one, but also establishing activities in research and education, supporting also industrial activities within companies, and also working with financial institutions like the European Investment Bank to develop more long-term funding instruments. And we have actually achieved a lot, and I will show you just very quickly a few examples. So on the more general international level, what we have done is that we signed a cooperation agreement very early with the European Space Agency, and I will come back to that excellent cooperation in a few minutes. We have also signed a number of bilateral agreements and started in engaging with different countries, and Italy is clearly one of those countries. We have also signed more specifically agreements with space agencies and became member of international organizations. And I mentioned it already, we also signed an agreement with the European Investment Bank to more specifically look at how we can support this new sector, this future in-space economy, also with the appropriate funding instruments. On the legal and regulatory side, so that's clearly a big challenge on its own. We have strongly engaged at the level of the United Nations also to try to push that topic. And actually the discussion is going on right now in Vienna on establishing a working group on this topic at the level of the United Nations. It was already mentioned, we also enacted a dedicated law on space resource utilization in 2017. So this we see as a first step. Obviously it's not enough, but it's one important first step to start clarifying the discussions on a national level. We have participated in different working groups, such as the Hague International Space Resource Governance Working Group, and also the Global Expert Group on Sustainable Lunar Activities, which is currently ongoing. And Luxembourg is also one of the founding signatories of the Artemis Accords, together with Italy. So this is to give you a bit a view on what we did on the international and legal level. Then more concretely on concrete activities. Now, in the meantime, we have different companies that are active in Luxembourg that actually have plans in space resource utilization. You see the names here. We have also national research centers that have started research in respect to ISRU. And we have also started a new master at our university in Luxembourg, which also includes modules on space resource exploration and utilization. So all in all, we have really done a lot of efforts to establish, to start such activities. And obviously we have done it in cooperation with our international partners and very importantly with the European Space Agency. And I guess Massimo, you mentioned it already. So ESA has a very complete strategy also on space resource utilization. And together with ESA, we have sought over the recent years to do more in Europe in that domain. And that was the main reason to establish the European Space Resource Innovation Center, ESRIC, which where we aim to establish an internationally recognized center of expertise for scientific, technical, business, and economic aspects related to the use of space resources for human and robotic exploration, but also more generally for laying the basis of a future in-space economy. And this center, ESRIC, was established at the basis as a national innovation center by the Luxembourg Space Agency and the Luxembourg Institute of Science and Technology. And ESA has joined the center as a strategic partner. And we are very open to also welcome further partners in this initiative. We truly want to develop an international center here together with all the different partners and specifically also the Italian partners. Now, what is ESRIC going to do? So ESRIC was started last year, so it's still very young, but we plan to develop activities in 4 main areas that you see here: in research, in business, in knowledge, and in community management. And the following slides will show you a bit what we have planned. So in research, actually, what we want to do is to implement research activities along the value chain of space resources. And actually, I think Massimo Sabatini mentioned the value chain. So going from first prospecting for resources, then extracting them, processing them, and then using them by manufacturing equipment, by producing oxygen and hydrogen, by building infrastructure as well. So that's where we have the connection with space architecture. So we have the full value chain, and we want to establish activities along that value chain. Obviously, some activities will take place within ESRIC in Luxembourg, but it will always be together with different partners in Europe, because overall the intention here is to establish a real center in Europe on that topic, and to make sure that Europe overall is not missing out and is not and also follows this topic sufficiently enough, because internationally, especially in the US and China and other countries, the topic is moving very, very quickly, and we need to make sure in Europe that we are also keeping that pace. So obviously, the beginning of ESRIC, we have a specific focus because we're working together with ESA on establishing space activities, more specifically on hydrogen and oxygen, on the moon. So it's about extracting these elements from lunar regolith, which is fully in line with ESA's space resource strategy and the different plans for operations on the moon, which were already presented earlier. But then in the meantime, we will also establish activities on prospecting and mining, and then also on manufacturing and construction. And again, we plan to do this with other both public and private entities. Then I said it already, ESRIC also has a very strong focus on business, because we truly believe in Luxembourg that we will also need companies and we will need to establish appropriate markets to truly expand in space. And one of the activities that we will set up in ESRIC is to support startups. So we will have a dedicated startup support program to support early stage startups, specifically aiming for activities, for longer term activities, let's say using space resources. And this program will be implemented together with ESA and also, of course, Luxembourg Space Agency and Technoport. Technoport is actually the largest technology incubator in Luxembourg. And currently we plan to launch this program in the second half of 2021. And it will be organized in different phases. First a mentoring phase and then an incubation phase. And in the longer term, also the possibility for these companies to actually stay within ESRIC to work together with the researchers there. Then I want to mention also the Space Resource Week. Maybe some of you were able to follow it. So this has gradually developed over the recent years, and I think some of the previous events were also mentioned by my previous speakers. So this is an event that we organized in April this year over 4 days, where we had different presentations on all kinds of different topics related to space resources. And actually we had more than 1,000 participants from 66 countries over 4 days, which makes it the largest event worldwide that is fully dedicated to space resources. And obviously we plan now to repeat this every year in full cooperation also with other European partners. And then, I also want to mention that ESRIC plans to build up a knowledge management platform. So what we see here is that there is already a lot of knowledge existing in Europe, and actually it was mentioned also for Italy. Italy obviously does a lot already in this domain. So the idea here is to have a common platform, European platform, where we gather all this knowledge, where we structure it, and then also make it available to the community. And then at the same time, of course, also follow what's going on an international level to make sure that we have the knowledge in Europe. And then last but not least, I also wanted to mention the ESRIC ESA Space Resource Challenge that was already very well explained by Massimo. So I have at least one slide, Massimo, that I can share. But I guess all the explanations here were given. So we're very much looking forward to this very exciting challenge that will take place in ESTEC in the Netherlands this year and then next year in Luxembourg. So
thank you.
I wanted to say, and if there are any questions, of course, I'm available to discuss. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all discussants for the first section, for the valuable information. Right now, we are quite in time in our scheduled program. I will start with the presentation of the second section. And right now we have 50 minutes dedicated to the university research. I will be the first, I will share my presentation and give me a feedback if you see my screen.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So perhaps I can. Okay. So my role now is to introduce the research work developed within the Politecnico of Bari in collaboration with other Italian and foreign academic partners. The opportunity of present webinar was born thanks to the embassy's desire to give visibility to Hype Mars project disclosed by some local newspaper about the degree thesis discussed at Politecnico of Bari around topic of space architecture, and in particular on the possibility to create a permanent base on Mars. The thesis entitled Mars Project, a hybrid class settlement project on the Martian surface. Around the research topic, we have generated the first research group between 3 Italian polytechnics aimed to develop an interaction between university, academy, and the world of company and industry of the space sector. Mars project was developed by Archimars team within the DCAR Department of Politecnico of Bari in collaboration with the Sasakawa International Center for Space Architecture of Houston University, with which a memorandum of understanding between academic institutions was signed in July 2020. Degree thesis discussed on February 17, the day before the Perseverance rover was landed, is the work of architecture doctors Alessandro Angione, Federica Buono, Ivana Fuscello, Isabella Paradiso, Mira Vlahovic, and Hanna Zecevich. Space architecture is an intrinsically and multidisciplinary research field and is part of extreme environment architecture, a branch of architecture which studies techniques and methods to allow human life in hostile and inhabitable places such as ocean abyss, terrestrial poles, deserts, area, and so on, dealing with the design concerning both orbital architecture and planetary architecture. The first deal with human life in space orbit, while second, specific object of our project, deals with human life on stable planetary basis. Mars is a possible vision of what the technology of the near future, optimized and calibrated on the new scientific acquisition taking place in the red planet, will be able to express in terms of feasibility. Is a work which intends to propose some specific consideration and interesting architectural solution related to the construction of a first Martian settlement considering of dome spaces interconnected by hexagonal network as protective environments for human life from cosmic radiation, micrometeorites, from solar and Martian sandstorms. As you can see on the slide, the main construction techniques hypothesized for the Mars is additive manufacturing carried out through and the appropriate configuration of autonomous and remotely controlled rovers capable of collecting and processing the Martian regolith. Before giving the floor to Vittorio Netti, who will describe the project in detail, Vittorio Netti is a space architect from SIXA University. I have the pleasure of pointing out the Archimars YouTube dissemination channel and the freshly printed book, Dwelling on Mars, Architecture Beyond the Earth, instead by preface, among others, by Ambassador Brasioli, our Rector Cupertino, and by Olga Banova, Director of SIXA University of Houston. Right now, I share the presentation with my colleague, Vittorio Netti. Please, Vittorio, you are allowed to present.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, I share my screen. Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, absolutely, Vittorio.
Okay. So, nice to meet you, everyone. I'm Vittorio Netti. I'm, as Professor Falacara said before, I'm a researcher, a space architect at SIXA. That is our Sasakawa International Center of Space Architecture. It's like a unicum, like research lab in the world that's explore just like space architecture and like extraterrestrial construction techniques, based in the University of Houston. And with Professor Falacara, I introduced the topic of space architecture at Politecnico of Bari, where I'm currently involved in a PhD in aerospace engineering. And together we worked on Archimars. Archimars, as like Professor Falacara already said, it was like this experimental project, the first of its kind at Politecnico di Bari, about space architecture and extraterrestrial construction on the Mars surface. We worked for 1 year together with this group of 6 students, but also we collaborated with many advisors and researchers that collaborated, giving their knowledge to contribute to this project, and you can find their contribution on the YouTube channel that the students created, in which they shared all the interview that they made to the different collaborators to this project. So the project itself, it's configured on it's basically it's scalable Martian outpost built with the heavy use of in-situ resources, but also integrated with prefabricated inflatable and deployable structures, bring it from Earth. Here you can see the mission architecture of the project that involved basically 3 phases. The first one for the transportation of the prefabricated structure on the surface. The second one will be and with the prospector mission, and the second one after the area has been identified. The second one comes with the rovers and robotic assets needed to transform the materials and in-situ resources in construction materials for the outpost. And after that the first nucleus of the habitat has been built autonomously and robotically by the means of these rovers and robots, there is the third and the final phase in which the crew arrive on the surface and they can take place and start living inside the habitat that they will find already built and fully functional. So we choose the aerospace Venezia area as like landing zone because for its like geomorphological characteristics such as a good protection from the external extreme environment of Mars, such as like dust storms and radiations, because this area it's kind of basically a depression that will so protect the surrounding from following like methodology, the different methodology of construction that we already do on Earth, like building inside a valley to protect a village from the weather and the high winds. So as I say here, this like the terrain itself presents this like honeycomb kind of structure that in a certain way it's the wall shape on which the whole project is based. Here we can already identify some basaltic materials that can be helpful for to be used as like construction materials, but also some ice water deposit that will be of course fundamental to enable the survivability of the crew and the construction and enabling the construction technology. So yes, this was I was talking about. This is like a photo taken in, if I remember correctly, like in 2004 by the Mars orbiter. And so here we have Mars. This is like the area which we will build our base in 2030. So the outpost classical distribution, it's based on 4 different areas that are identified. One, it's like the habitat area, and there is the energy production area, and on the opposite side there is the ISRU collection and transformation area At far from all the three of them, there is like the landing area. This for obviously for protection of the dust that come from the landing and takeoff of the rockets. Yes. So of course, like designing for space and designing for human exploration doesn't mean just like designing a structure, designing a building, designing an habitat, but also it means designing the process. And to do that, we also designed an entire family, of course, in a conceptual way, of surface assets that will be capable to enable the construction and the survivability of the crew. So this like bee rover family I was being called it because they take inspiration from insects. Is divided in like a spider explorer that is basically like a prospector, and there is the flattener that has the role of preparing the area for the construction, and to after there is the excavator that is used to collect the regolith and the materials, and after he will feed to the bee transporter. That is basically like a transportation rover that will also unload the materials inside the processor that will transform the material in 3D printable concrete. Of course, at the end of this process, there is the printer itself and the lifter that will be used to place the prefabricated module coming from Earth. At the end of all of everything, there is like, of course, the pressurized rover that is the only manned rover of the family, and this will be used to transport the around the humans around the surface. As you can see, most of the rovers are based on the same chassis, and this is like, of course, for modularity, and so they will be easier to repair and even on the field, even when they are still in the autonomous phase. Now we will explore the most important part, that is like the construction process. So when the first like rocket land on the surface and will unload the rovers after the, of course, we are talking about phase 2. So it's like the when we already prospected the surface, we identified the specific area for construction, and so it's now it's the time for the rover to come and start the construction itself. Of course, so the rover, they will start working on the ISRU area and will start to like collect and process the regolith, with which they will start building protection walls and the foundation of the habitats. After, when the construction phase is finished, and so the dust is settled down, we can assemble the prefabricated modules and also the power generators in the shape of solar panels and fission reactors, such as the kilopower. So when the construction is finalized at the end, SLS Block 1B will come with the first screw on the surface that can take place in the habitat to start their 2 years mission. As you can see here, there is like a representation of what the habitat will look like. The habitat, as you can see, it's a mix of 3D printed spaces and prefabricated modules coming from Earth. So this is the first expansion of the settlement someone we talked about, but of course, as we say, the habitat is made, it's like modular and it's scalable, so it's made to be expanded for future crew operations that will be able to support more humans on the surface in a stable way. Has been analyzed different like processes possible, like excavated, 3D printed, inflatable, and basically this project uses all the three of them. Of course, there are many references in the architecture here on Earth that helped us to design the habitat itself. And it's curious how many of these references, they come mostly from the ancient history of humanity, when the construction was simpler and but very effective. That's why, of course, we can't expect the same precision and the same basically construction quality that we have on Earth in a remote autonomous mode. So also the construction methodology need to accept a certain level of unprecision in the construction, and that's why ancient construction methodologies, such as the ones shown in these images, are perfect for the purpose. So, of course, the transport, this kind of like construction methodology using 3D printed ISTITUTION basaltic material, it's based on the geopolymer Earth technology. So we need to like bring part of the material from Earth, but most of it will be sourced directly in place, like the water and like the regolith. And some of the solvent that can be produced directly in place from the Martian surface. Here you can see how the B processor and the B 3D printer, they work together to extrude the materials. So now we go to the construction sequence. So they started the 3D printer come and start, the first, after the excavation, the first things that is done is like to 3D print the foundation. And once it's like right at a certain level of the construction of the habitat nucleus, the first prefabricated models, in this case is the area calculated. So the construction will continue around. The same things happen for the windows. So they will find themselves integrated with the external shell that protect from the micrometeorites and the radiation. So when we reach the culmination of the habitats, the inflatable internal model is inserted from the top, undeployed, and it's the habitat is closed on the top with this cap that's that will seal basically the habitat from the top. Of course, you have to remember that the external shell, it's not pressurized, but it will be the internal the deployable inflatable structure that will be the habitable space. This is the external 3D printed part. It's mostly for micrometeorites and radiation protection. And this, here we like is the process of how we created this like 3D printed texture on the outside of the habitat that will help to trap like the dust during the dust storms and to deflect the micrometeorites. So like even the 3D printing process, it become functional of the purpose of the habitat. So what's happened when everything the construction is finished? Well, the undeployed internal model is start to deploy. Here you can see with a see-through rendering. Here the central core deploy and the inflatable, it's inflated. So the floors opens. This happens all automatically without motors, but using like preloaded springs that will charge will unwind opening the internal structure. So you can see all the 3 floors are deployed, and this is what it looks like from the inside. And after, of course, the astronaut will need to outfit the interior spaces when they go in, when they arrive on the surface. So on the inside, we have a division on 3 levels. So as you see before, The lowest level, the one that has access to the ground, is basically a research center, control center, and medical area. And yes, of course, the 3 airlocks that they will connect the habitat to other habitats or to the exterior. And there is a second floor that is basically the living space. So there is the living quarters and the dining areas and the common areas. And the last floor is basically more sports and relax leisure space that will help us help the astronauts to relieve the psychological pressure at the end of the day. Of course, like the first mean of nutrition for the astronauts will be plants, and they will be cultivated in special models that are outfitted just as basically vertical gardens, when different kind of plants are cultivated based on their nutrition values. Yes, but not only that, once that the habitat will start to expand and we scale it up, and so probably the crews will pass more and more time on the Mars surface, we started thinking also at how we can fight against the need for external spaces, and we have to fight the fact that on Mars we can't just go out and take a walk. So we started to design specific models that will be used for this purpose. This is like kind of like a virtual garden that can be used by the crews during their stay to supply for the lack of external spaces. Here you can see some drawings of them, and so the habitat can and the whole settlement can expand more and more. So from the first nucleus, this modular architecture allows like a constant expansion that will enable at a certain point the permanent stay on the surface. And that's, I think, that's all for today. I want to thank again the Politecnico Bari and the SIXA Research Lab and the University of Houston. And thank you, all of you, for the attention and for the possibility that has given us today to present this project. Thank you.
Many thanks to Vittorio Netti for the clear and detailed illustration of Hive Mars project. And now I have the pleasure of giving the floor to Professor Amedeo Manuelo Bertetto and Giuseppe Marano, both from the Polytechnic of Turin. Please, you are allowed to present. Who will start first?
I'm going to briefly introduce our presentation, and thank you to all of the attenders to this conference, to the colleagues from the Technical University of Bari and Turin, and of course to the ambassador. What I am going to present here is our first steps in the field of space architecture. Let's use this definition. And I first of all stress that we are going to work on this topic with other colleagues, for instance, Professor Maggiore and Professor Brischetto, that are from Aerospatial and department, from the DMAS of department. What I am going to introduce very fast, if I'm okay, is that this problem, this type of construction problem is a very complex task, as it deals with many different aspects. Not only with the construction, let me say, in structural terms, but also in organizative and also topological in terms of the typology of construction that we have to use. In this field, I can't forget that Italian competencies are quite very has been and still now is quite well recognized worldwide, as we have had some master in the construction art more than in construction science, such as Nervi or Musmeci, or the well-known bridge designer that is now worldwide known as the designer of the bridge in Genova. So the what we are thinking is to join together different aspects of constructions as they did in the past. They, for instance, Nervi, that is maybe one of the most famous in this field, join together intuition, construction strategy, precasting technologies, also developed specifically for that kind of for the structure he was building. And we can see that sometimes there are some, the Basento Bridge in Potenza, designed and constructed by Musmeci, the Professor Musmeci, is really a joint bridge together, shape and structure. It's I don't know if it is an example of bridge in terms of structures or in terms of architecture. Now, the main problem dealing with the specific aspects, so moon housing or Mars housing, let me say, deals with different possible strategies. So using volts or and grid shells, and using different kind, we can use different kind of materials. We can adopt the 3D printing or also other similar technology to increase productivity in terms of using local materials. That means the regolith, the moon regolith, for instance. Okay, and so we have to join together shape, mesh, volume, technology, and material characteristic, and so on. Next one, please. And so it's a high complex problem where we can adopt it is formalized in a very simple sketch I draw and on the left. Okay, so to define a volume that could be livable. Okay, separating by different environmental accidents like as radiation, absence of atmosphere, and so on. And we can see we have different shapes that could be adopted to maximize the productivity, reducing as much as possible the use of non-local materials. This is the key point on working on. And for instance, this problem is well known and could be approached by the so-called topology optimization. So defining in a mathematical way the optimization of how to build structures given a fixed geometry, reducing as much as possible the material usage. I would like now to share the presentation with Professor Manuello that give us some more detailed analysis of the problem we are dealing with in Turin. Thank you very much. Please, Amedeo.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Marano. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, perfectly.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Professor Marano, for the introduction of our work that we are going to do and we are doing at the Politecnico di Torino. Thank you also, of course, to Professor Fallacara for the introduction of this session, and to Italian Embassy in Luxembourg for this event. As mentioned by Professor Marano, this is a very complex topic. If we wanted to design and to try to give some indication to obtain a design for structure that we can put on Mars surface or on Moon surface, we have to understand some problem. that I summarized in a sentence: new loads for a new world. It means that we have very different boundary condition that we have to consider to design and to make structure on this surface. The first is the difference between, for example, the Earth and the Mars gravity, that is 2.63. The second and one of the main characteristic, one of the most important one, is the ratio between the Earth and the Mars atmospheric pressure, that is about 100. So this is a main constraint that we have to consider. The other one is the high thermic excursion that we can have in one day, so between -15 to -95. So this data come from In-Situ mission. That is a mission that give us some indication about the characteristic of the atmosphere of the surface of this kind of planet of Mars. And the other consideration that we have to do is the typical ground wind velocity that give us some loads on our structure that we are going to design. These wind effect are mentioned like dust devil or dust storms, and we have between 60 km/h up to 300 km/h like boundary condition in terms of wind. So we have to consider very different kind of structure, going to very efficient one, also to adaptability structure, and also to a sustainable structure. One of the main considerations that we performed at the beginning of our research was the design, the dimension of shapes defined by ribs constituting the shell, also because we have to consider not only a plain shell constituted by, for example, a simulant material, or if we are in that surface of regulate material. But we have to consider also the possibility to have some element constituting our vault, giving the possibility to have some holes and to have some part of our structure that can be designed for light. Of course, that is very important for the human habitats. The other one is the production or formworks by digital processing, or the production of the vault itself by digital processing and three-dimensional printing. So we studied this kind of vault that are made by different ribs, by different elements, and we try to evaluate some particular characteristic related to the stability of this kind of vault, looking to the local and non-local typology in terms of instability. We performed and we fine-tuned a proper our procedure to define the first step that give us the shape of this shell that can be put on Mars or Moon in extraterrestrial habitats, that is based on a dynamic equilibrium, considering a net suspended into the space. The dynamic equilibrium of this net is ensured, of course, by the D'Alembert principle. So we connect some masses, some elements, some spherical element with masses with a net of ropes. These ropes are going down into the space, in a three-dimensional space, and at the end we obtain, like mentioned by Professor Marano at the beginning, looking to the pioneeristic works of, for example, Musmeci, Frejotto, Gaudí, and so on, the optimal shape that minimize the bending moment inside the structure and give us a compression holding shape. So looking to different kind of constraint related to the external constraint, the number of suspended point, the number of constrained point in the suspension net, we have to we can define a different shape according to the constraint, according to the number of elements. In this graph, we have the reproduction of a parameter that give us a measure of the depth of our suspended net, that give us also an important information about the final shape of our shell. And we obtain that this particular characteristic of the shape that is related to the final depth of the suspended net, that is the reversed shape of the shell itself, is connected to the number of elements according to their characteristic in terms of constraint, and the so-called slack coefficient. The slack coefficient is the difference between the distance between two masses and the length of the rope itself. We performed and we fine-tuned a particular procedure to optimize this kind of procedure when the net is composed by a very big number of elements, using the NARB surface as an intermediate step of our procedure, and at the end we obtain the final shape of the shell that is optimized in terms of internal solicitation, minimizing the bending moment, of course. So going to this path, using this procedure for what concerned for finding that give us the optimal shape for our vault, we performed using a fuse deposition modeling and using digital fabrication procedure. We performed a prototype of a shell made of 100 type of element constituting the shell itself. All the elements are obtained by three-dimensional printing of polyactide element that give us the shape of each bricks of each element, and we obtain the final configuration and the construction of our shell. Now I go fast to the conclusion. We performed several analyses in order to understand which is the effect of increasing the whole percentage of the shell, in order to understand which is the best strategy to put holes on the surface of our vaults. Look, we tried looking to different paths, looking to different strategy to increase the number of holes, that in other terms is the pierced percentage of the vault. We obtained a difference in the consideration of which is the most probable collapse mechanism that is related to the optimization of a shell itself. We performed also some analysis in order to understand the far field strain behavior of the shell under loading condition by digital image correlation. And in this past video, you can observe the phase in which the cardboard reed is removed. Also in this case, the cardboard reed is made by a parametric process, and we obtain the final shape of the prototype. So at the end, I can mention also that we are going to study with our colleague that were mentioned by Professor Marano, belonging to the Department of Aerospace Engineering of the Politecnico di Torino, some sensor systems that are able to take under control this kind of structure also in outer space and in extraterrestrial habitat, that are based on fiber bright gratings, acoustic emission, and digital image correlation. I want to end my talk saying that is a very important event. This is a very important occasion to show the possibility that we are going to research, to find in our university, and try to take a link with the companies, with the industry that they are hearing us, I think that if we find a way to collaborate also in terms of, for example, to build other kind of prototype, look into the digital fabrication, look into the additive manufacturing task is very important for us. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much to Professor Marano and Manuel Bertetto. Thanks for the interesting presentation on shell and structural voltage system like stereotomy 2.2, new life of stone construction. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Professor.
And we are quite in delay related to our scheduled time, and so I'm sorry for that. But I have right now the great pleasure to introduce Valentina Sumini, a space architect, famous space architect, researcher from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and visiting professor at Politecnico of Milano. Please, Valentina, you are allowed to make your presentation. Thank you so much, Valentina.
Thank you, Professor Falacara, for your kind introduction. It is a great pleasure to be here with you today. I feel extremely honored to share my research with all of you. Do you see my slides?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. So just a few words to introduce myself. As Professor Falacara already mentioned, I'm both visiting professor at Politecnico di Milano, where I teach architecture for human space exploration, and I'm going to teach again next year. And I'm very grateful also for this opportunity. I'm also a research affiliate at MIT Media Lab in Responsive Environment Research Group and Space Exploration Initiative, where I develop space architecture solution for enabling human presence in space across scale and disciplines. So planning villages, for example, so at habitation scale up to soft robotics system, wearable devices, and art installation, and new computational design tools to optimize structure for the moon and Mars, and also portals for reconnecting humans with nature during these long exploration missions. They're actually very challenging for human beings. I would like to start this presentation actually talking about the first space architecture that landed on the surface of the moon back in 1969. And I'm quoting here Neil Armstrong, the first man who stepped on the moon back then, a giant leap for mankind. And back then, the space architecture was the lunar module that was able to make the two astronauts survive on the surface of the moon. As you can see, this architecture is very minimal, is essential, and was really enabling their survival, but no more than that. And today we are facing a new challenge. Thanks to the NASA Artemis programs, we want to go back to the moon, but this time to stay for long-term presence. And it's extremely intriguing and fascinating challenge, as we want to go back in terms of human presence already in 2024, but we also want to establish after that an Artemis base camp at the South Pole of the moon by 2030. And this is an extremely challenging goal, and I think that the new generation, also my students and myself and all the researchers that are here today, we have to really face these new design challenges. It requires actually new design methodology to approach this sort of architectural challenge. And here are my main research questions. One of the first research questions I asked myself, so what will the outposts look like? How will they be resupplied? How will in-situ resources be integrated? How will psychological needs of crew be supported? What lessons learned from space architecture can be applied here on Earth? And which terrestrial application do we foresee for future lunar habitation systems? So those are the main research questions that drive actually my research in space architecture. If we want to consider space architecture as a discipline, well, I think we are kind of wrong, because as mentioned before, also space architecture is intrinsically multidisciplinary, interconnects different disciplines and skill sets. And here are some pillars that are fundamental in terms of space architecture. First of all, space science, because we really need to understand the environment we are designing for. That is actually extreme, and it is the most harsh environment we can think of and design for. Engineering, because there are several fields of engineering that we really need to take into account when designing a human habitation system. Industrial design, because we want to use a human-centered design approach to design our habitat, and ergonomics is part of this design challenge. Medicine, because we want to keep astronauts healthy, even long duration mission on the moon, and one day also on Mars, when the shortest mission is 600 days on the surface of Mars, not considering the travel. And psychology, because we want to keep them psychologically sane. And you all know that being isolated in confined environment for a long time is extremely difficult. And also art, because we want to be able to generate art and vision for future generation as well in terms of space architecture. All of this is space architecture. And the question we are posing today with this seminar is like, which type of space research challenges industry will have to face in the next decade to go back to the moon, to say. Related to space science, we need to focus on in-situ resources utilization. In terms of engineering, we need to focus on robotics and collaborative construction methods. Integrating with computational design approach that will allow us to apply multi-objective optimization strategies in order to efficiently design our habitats, and also define smart interfaces. Human-computer interaction system will be part of the ergonomics, because we really want to monitor the architecture we're going to live and the humans while using it. Artificial intelligence and telemedicine and also robotics will also be part of the health component. And in terms of psychology, it would be extremely important to use advanced communication system to communicate with the Earthlings while we are in a mission. And also art and entertainment, because this is also part of space architecture. So those are like new opportunities for industry who wants to deal with space in the next decade. And if we really want to, for example, starting from the architectural scale, for example, right now we can define 3 different classes of habitation system. Class 1, pre-integrated. Class 2, there are modular systems that can actually be integrated also in situ. And then class 3, we're using mainly in-situ robotic fabrication systems. They're extremely advanced. And in our project, actually, we all reference to the International Space Station that right now is the only space architecture that we have deployed in low Earth orbit, and actually celebrate 21 years this year. And it's extremely fascinating, and is still there, it's still working. And sometimes we have some leakages, but it's intriguing. And human presence in there is proven to be effective and efficient. And so, but the structure, if you look at just as an architectural perspective, the structure of the International Space Station, we see it's composed mainly by rigid modules that are actually very constrained by the payload ferrying system of the rockets that we're gonna use. And therefore, like recently from NASA Transat up to Beagle Aerospace B module is the currently deployed International Space Station, we explore how we can really minimize mass, launching mass, using inflatable and pneumatic structures to be folded inside the rocket and then be pressurized while in there. And these open up a new series of possibilities in terms of design approach. And this, for example, one of the projects I'm involved in is the Moon Village project. We can see exhibited at the Biennale Venezia this year. And this is actually part of a rigid core element and inflatable other elements that are folded inside the rocket and then are pressurized while once they're in situ on the Shackleton, or the rim of the Shackleton crater. It's actually a perfect location for different reasons. Mainly we can see Earth from there. We have the peak of eternal light, and it's possible to find the ice also inside the Shackleton crater. So it's a good, extremely good location to that. And this project was extremely fascinating. Again, this was a very successful partnership between the European Space Agency, a very famous architecture office, is more owing than Mary. I'm extremely honored as an architect to collaborate with them, and MIT, that also bring inside Professor also Jeffrey Hoffman, who has like a previous experience in as being also an astronaut, another astronaut, and gave a extremely intriguing insight how he's gonna live one day on the moon as an astronaut perspective. Having said that, so these modules, once deployed on the rim of the Shackleton crater and pressurized, because there's no atmospheric pressure on the moon, then we have to be covered using a regolith structure in order to prevent micrometeor impact, prevent also the problem of radiation. And so using this thick radiation shielding is also possible to make it safer. And of course, to do that, we really need to focus on robotic construction techniques, additive manufacturing, as you can see in this rendering by SOM. But if we want to do the next giant leap, so go further than the moon and going to Mars, this, for example, is one of the first projects I did when I arrived in MIT back in 2016. This Redwood Forest City project was our winning Mars design competition. And the concept was designing a city on Mars using mainly and only local materials, so maximizing the use of in-situ resources. So in this case, no inflatable was involved in there. And so what how we did, so we approached this design using an extremely advanced computational design tool that I personally implemented during the project. The idea was populating a series of trees, and this is the concept of the Redwood Forest City. So the crater was populated by this tree-like structure, and they are made of a dome, made of polyethylene and glass lead and water to shield against cosmic radiation. And it was done actually excavating root system underground, and while excavating it's possible to find ice that can be converted to water, of course, and the ground of Mars, and this water was enabling the radiation shielding protection. Here you can find a single tree-like structure that is actually, of course, enclosed into a dome. You know, like the dome is like two-thirds of a sphere. Is one of the sphere. Perfect sphere is, of course, the best optimized structure you can think of in a place where actually the atmospheric pressure is extremely low, and internal pressurization is becoming the main design load for this overall system. And actually, the water that was navigating inside the branch structure and creating this shielding against cosmic radiation has been mapped to Monte Carlo simulation. Was developed by University of Bologna, where we can see the radiation, the neutron dose at different location of the habitat. The red areas are more exposed, and the blue one are the safer ones. And what is interesting for us that for the first time we understood that we have to design spaces for Mars that are related to the time of exposure of radiation, and so they are not. We cannot live all the time in one places we are used here in buildings on Earth, but we really have to differentiate our activity according to minimize the amount of radiation that we're gonna absorb. And then we made another code that was actually how we're going to optimize the sequence. Imagine to 3D print the frame that, of this overall structure, and how we can optimize the sequence of 3D printing for not having any type of support, so minimizing the use of in-situ resources. And this was actually part of this research as well. And what you can see here, as we talked about a multi-objective optimization, so we try to optimize the structure, we try to optimize according to the amount of water that was required, and how many branches do we really need to be efficient in terms of radiation protection. And so what you can see here is the population of optimal results of branch structure. And what you can see here is the floor plan, where you can see, for example, a different type of radiation dose according to different type of structure. And here I just highlighted one structure, and you really have to perform another Monte Carlo simulation analysis for each one of these configuration. But it's intriguing because you have a plan where we're going to locate different type of activity based on the radiation absorbed by the structure itself. It is actually extremely new for us. that we are protected here on Earth. Then another challenge that we won back in 2019 was this autonomous greenhouse system challenge, was another big idea challenge. This was a collaborative project between MIT and Alta Scuola Politecnica. So that collected also students from both Politecnico di Milano and Politecnico di Torino. On board, we also had, again, Professor Jeffrey Hoffman, and who also gave an interesting insight about the importance of reconnecting with nature. And so having, yes, of course, an autonomous greenhouse system able to efficiently produce crops during the mission on Mars for 600 days. This was part of the challenge, but also being able to reconnect with nature and having, for example, a relaxation area at the top where the water reservoir that was actually filtering the water, extracting from Mars and hydrating the hydroponic greenhouse spiral system was generating sort of cascaded with the sound of a rain in order to remember the season and a rain on Earth. This is something that we don't think right now, but one day if we will be there, probably we will miss that. And that's another project that I've done was the Tidmarsh Living Observatory Portal. We can see here my professor, Joseph Paradiso. The concept here was how we can really create a multisensory experience. We can reconnect in real time to nature. This was a reconnection to Tidmarsh, that is a marsh in Massachusetts, and that the Responsive Environment Research Group collected real-time data for a decade, and we wanted to replicate and navigate through time and having all these sensory experience all together. So sound, the smells of the marsh, and so the music, and you can say the sound of birds and the water, and also projection to have a visual experience. It was a cocoon, and also was meant to generate privacy also within a space habitat. And then to hand my presentation, I would like just to show you that thanks to the work of my students at Politecnico di Milano, we were able to generate visions, extremely advanced vision in terms of concepts. So this concept, for example, was how we can inhabit a lava tube on Mars, 3D printing a structure within the lava tube, and the computationally estimate the shape of these inflatable elements. Module can be interlaced within this 3D printed structure to be safe and protected against cosmic radiation using the natural environment. And also another project, again, from my student Politecnico di Milano, where we're going to think of how we're going to reuse the lander and integrate with the use of a local material, like we can have, for example, glass and polyethylene water to create a shielding against cosmic radiation, create a multi-pressure environments for both outside activity and internal activity to have a sustainable presence on Mars. And then to conclude, I would like to invite you to have a look at the website of Space Sky, Human Computer Interaction for Space Exploration, where we can collect lots of several contributors related to how we're going to use HCI for human space exploration, advancing construction method, advancing exploration and safety during this space mission. Again, it is session of human-computer interaction was organized in collaboration with Politecnico di Milano, UCL, NASA Tree Space Health, 2VM, NASA, San Jose State University, MIT, and MIT Media Lab. So thank you all.
Great, stunning, Valentina Sumini. Thank you, Valentina, for sharing with us the amazing research work that you developed in the last year. And now it's time for Professor Antonino Salmeri, researcher in space law at University of Luxembourg and co-lead of the Space Exploration Project Group at the Space Generation Advisory Council. Please, Antonino, you are allowed to present. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the floor. And let me begin by asking if you can see and read me, I hope. Yes?
Yes.
And could you make me co-host in order so I can share my screen and begin my presentation, please?
Okay, I ask to Amedeo.
Yes, I have it now. And can you see the slides?
Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome everybody, and let me begin by thanking the organizers of this wonderful event, in particular the Italian Embassy and the universities involved in the organization of the event, and the brilliant moderation that
has been done so far, and all the colleagues for their brilliant intervention. Today, I'm going to talk about legal aspects of space resources and space architecture. I believe I am the only lawyer in the room, so I hope you will bear with me if my presentations will not be as fancy and potentially as colorful as those of the previous colleagues, but I hope they can be informative in terms of the legal aspects that apply to the fundamental job that all of you are doing for the future of space exploration. Just a few words about myself. As it was already said before, I am a lawyer. I'm not a professor at the University of Luxembourg. I'm a doctoral researcher here. I'm pursuing a PhD on enforcement challenges and regulatory aspects of space mining with the support of the National Research Fund of Luxembourg. And I studied in various universities in Europe. I had my law degree from the University of Catania, and then I specialized in law and government of the European Union at the Luis Guido Carli University, and finally in air and space law at the University of Leiden. As it was said before, I cooperate with different organizations in the fields of lunar governance and space resources for Space Generation Advisory Council and the Global Expert Group on Sustainable Lunar Activities, for instance. And I'm also a graduate of the International Space University and a registered attorney at the Italian Bar Association. Now, very briefly, what I'm going to talk about to you today is a brief overview of the fundamentals of space law. I take that not everybody is familiar with what space law is, and actually that there is, in fact, a corpus of regulation related to space activities. And then I will quickly touch upon the fundamental legal aspects of space resources and space architecture. First of all, what is space law? Space law is a special domain of public international law. That means that the majority of the regulation that applies to space activities is conducted at the international level. I believe you already heard a few remarks related to the multilateral dimension of space activities from Matthias Link from the Luxembourg Space Agency and the European Space Resources Innovation Center. This is exactly where all comes from. It's so-called corpus juris spatialis. It's an ensemble of customary law principles, which are principles that apply to the international community of states as a whole. 5 international treaties negotiated between the 60s and the 70s, and a series of resolutions from the United Nations General Assembly. Obviously, I'm not going to touch upon all of them today, and I will focus my attention only on one source, which is the famous Magna Carta of space law, the Outer Space Treaty, to which all the countries mentioned today are party today. And it's a rather old treaty, but very effective and fundamentally important for the regulation of space activities. It was concluded in 1967, and it counts 111 parties to this day. What does the Outer Space Treaty? It's a legal regime redefining the interaction between law and technology. Because of the very nature of space activities, which is constantly changing, constantly evolving, depending on the evolution of technology, also rather risky naturally and requiring a lot of capabilities. The international space law regime is based on flexibility, adaptiveness, and evolutionary nature. So the Outer Space Treaty provides a general framework through principles that then are specified in further regulatory instrument and in further national legislation, depending on the issue that needs to be implemented. But the defining features of international space law are international cooperation on the one hand and peaceful uses on the other one. And those are reflected in the body that is entrusted with the development of international space law, which is the COPUS, which is the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. When the Outer Space Treaty was concluded, the main purpose was to ensure that space would remain a peaceful environment and an opportunity for cooperation among nations all over the world. Now, this happened naturally more than 50 years ago, and the industry is changing. We will hear after my presentation from all the fantastic industries that are redefining the boundaries of space activities. And so also space law is reacting to these new developments and is adjusting to the privatization of the space sector, what is usually known as new space movement. And for that, there is an increasing role of national space legislation in order to better regulate and interact with private activities. Now, very briefly, what are the key rules applicable to all space activities? You can find a list here that provides all the fundamental principles of space law. They are all laid down in the Outer Space Treaty, as mentioned before. And we begin with freedom. The fundamental rule of space is that states are free to explore and use outer space. Naturally, this freedom is not absolute. It is actually very much, let's say, shaped and framed within the framework of the Aerospace Treaty. And so there are different limits. One of them, and the most important one, is the prohibition of national appropriation. So outer space, and especially celestial bodies, are not subject to any national appropriation, meaning that the territory cannot be annexed to any state. And to preserve the peacefulness and the freedom of space, Article 3 of the Aerospace Treaty provides the full applicability of international law, so that space is not a sort of Wild West where everyone can do whatever, but on the other hand, it is actually very regulated, and all international obligations apply also to space activities. And the respect of the UN Charter is one of the fundamental cornerstones of all space regulation. To preserve further the peacefulness of space and to enable international cooperation, Article 4 provides that no nuclear weapon shall be placed, stationed, or sent through outer space, and that celestial bodies shall be used for exclusively peaceful purposes. And then finally, the final principles concern the activities of states, and in particular, the responsibility, liability, and jurisdiction of states. These principles laid down in Articles 6, 7, and 8 of the Aerospace Treaty essentially provide that all space activities always need to have a state behind, assuming international responsibility for what's happening, and that any damage caused by objects launched into outer space will be paid by the launching states. And finally, that those states also have jurisdiction and control over these activities in order to ensure respect of the rule of law. Article 9 is what I like to call the systemic clause of the Aerospace Treaty, because it brings all states in thinking to systemic approaches. And this is one of the cornerstones that I want to address today in terms of space architecture. The idea is that states will always have to pay due regard to the other interests of other parties when conducting space activities, and consult in case there may be potentially harmful interference, all trying to avoid environmental damage to outer space. And the issue of space debris is obviously here testifying how we need to improve on this side. Now, how these principles apply to space resources. It is very important to begin by saying that space resource activities are allowed as part of the freedom to use celestial bodies. You may have heard sometime that there are discussions on whether they are legal or not. My answer as a lawyer is that they are perfectly legal under the Aerospace Treaty. The question is, however, how do we practically regulate space resources and how they are practically conducted? Because as I said, the freedom to use celestial bodies is not absolute. It needs to respect various principles, like the idea of sharing the benefits of space activities, the principle that the exploration and use of outer space shall be the province of all humankind, and the free access that needs to be granted to all areas of celestial bodies. At the same time, the prohibition of national appropriation is not one of these limits, for the simple reason that Article 2 of the Aerospace Treaty applies to the territorial element of celestial bodies. It means that no state can go, plant a flag, put a fence, and say, this is part of Italy now. At the same time, this is not applicable to the resources therein, because they can be separated from the celestial body and therefore lawfully utilized. And also because space resources will be crucial and critical to enable sustainable space exploration. So if we would forbid space resource activities, we would forget any sort of sustainable space exploration. At the same time, naturally, as I said before, space resources need to be conducted in full compliance with international law and with a special outlook to international peace and security. We do not want space resources or any kind of future exploration to become the reason for tension on Earth. And so that's why it is very important that we regulate them in the proper way. And it is then fundamentally even more important that space resources shall be used exclusively for peaceful purposes, which means that no military involvement whatsoever can be allowed in space resource activities. From the design to the final commercialization of the resources, there should always be only civil or commercial actors. Further to that, the applicability of the principles of responsibility, liability, and jurisdiction and control ensure that also space resource activities are conducted in compliance with the Aerospace Treaty, and that there's always be a state that will assume responsibility and will ensure that these activities are conducted lawfully, even when the activity is actually conducted by a private company. Because in space, every national activity is always attributable to the responsibility of a state, which also shall exercise jurisdiction and control in order to ensure that everything is going by the rules. And finally, the principles of due regard and potentially harmful interference avoidance will be critical in terms of space resources regulation, because it is only by paying due regard that we can ensure that space resources are conducted in a sustainable way, for instance, not spoiling all the resources that are available in a certain location. And it's also thanks to the principle of consultation for harmful interference that we can ensure safety of operation, and we can avoid that a certain spacecraft landing in an area is compromising mining operation or any other operation on the moon or other celestial bodies, which shall also not be harmfully contaminated to the greatest extent possible when conducting these activities, meaning that we should minimize the creation of debris and actually avoid as much as possible the development of new waste on celestial bodies. Why then space architecture, and what could be the legal aspects of that? As I go briefly to my conclusion, the idea is that space architecture will be critical to implement the Outer Space Treaty when conducting space resource activities. And here, I'm very pleased to congratulate all the previous interventors, because what you're trying to do with your solutions is exactly what we need in order to ensure full compliance with international space law. And so there is the importance to have architectural design in a holistic way and approach to develop an integrated value chain for ensuring that all space activities can be conducted with the participation of all countries. The idea of developing and incrementally developing the harmonious growth of one settlement of mining operation altogether is essential in order to enable international cooperation, peace, and sustainability. And this can be drivers of responsible, adaptive, and effective governance. Now, one example is exactly the idea of utilize the experience under the International Space Station for developing internationally shared modular facilities. This would ensure respect of the principle of international space law that I mentioned before, would help to build trust, preserve international peace and security, and involve everybody through co-design, open access, and interoperability. Before concluding, I just want to highlight that there are already some attempts to resolve the problems and to enhance the regulation of space resources activities and space architecture, which you can see in this slide. One of them has been mentioned already by Matthias Link, the establishment of a potential working group on space resources within the legal subcommittee of UN Corpus. There have been the Artemis Accords, which are an excellent attempt at providing an operationalization of the principles of international space law. And also on behalf of Space Generation Advisory Council, I would like to draw your attention on the lunar governance report developed just a couple of weeks ago from Space Generation Advisory Council Eagle team. All these efforts are meant to start a dialogue. So my observation to you is to please keep in mind the legal and policy aspect every time you work and develop architectural solutions. So in summary, space resources activities are permitted and welcome under international law. To ensure full compliance, we need to be careful about the practical aspects. And here is where space architecture can play a critical role in ensuring peacefulness and sustainable use of space resources. The UN is working on this, but there is much that needs to be done. And so hopefully multi-stakeholder and multidisciplinary contributions like the one we're trying to do today will be essential and will only continue to grow. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and leave back the floor to the moderators.
Many thanks to Antonino Salmeri. Absolutely interesting topic of relevant development for future idea of space economy and law aspect regulation. Thank you so much, Antonino. I thank everyone for this rich section, and I leave the role of moderator to Professor Amedeo Manuelo Bertetto for the third section dedicated to industries from Italy and Luxembourg. Thank you. Please, Amedeo, take the place of moderator. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Fallacara. It's a big pleasure for me and the honor to introduce the moderator of this session. Is a very important moment, I think, this one for this Space Architecture Day, because we have the possibility now to understand the actual possibility of technology and how to link our research to the possibility of this technology. So the first intervention that I have on my list is from OHB Italia, Engineer Marco Stanghini, from Space Exploration and ISRO in OHB Italia. Please, Engineer Stanghini.
Thank you very much, Amedeo. I would like to thank the organization. If you can co-host my presentation, I am... okay, perfect. Are you looking my presentation? Yes?
Yes, very well.
Perfect. So thank you. Now I will put in full screen. Okay, so thank you very much to the organization, to the Italian ambassador Diego Brasioli, to the university and industry participating to this important online seminar. So I will start my presentation. I will try to go quite fast. So this year is the birthday of HB Italia, founded in 81, so are 40 years of passion for space, and we have put in orbit 56 satellites, payload and instrument, always successfully operating. Okay, our company, we are one of the Italian top satellite system integrator, and we are an heritage, as mentioned, both in satellite instrument and equipment, design, development, and production. We are about 210 people. The most important thing to be underlined is that about 80% of these are graduate, most of them coming from Politecnico di Milano, where we have a strong and long cooperation running. We have an headquarters in Milano and other two plants in Rome and Benevento in south of Italy. So since this online seminar is hosted by in Luxembourg, I start my brief presentation mentioning satellites that we are producing for the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg is an high resolution, very high resolution optical LEO orbit satellite, and it will be launched beginning 2023 and will be operated in Luxembourg. Coming to the purpose of my presentation concerning exploration, since there is no space architecture without any exploration, we are performing an important phase A-B study for the mission called Comet Interceptor for ESA. It will be launched in 2027 in a dual launch with another scientific mission, Ariel. And the target of this mission is to identify a comet and release two CubeSats that will go closer to the comet to study this comet. So it's an important project for to study the evolution of the solar system. Another important mission in which we are involved in this case with our mother company OHB System Germany is ERA mission that is an important contribution to a bilateral cooperation between NASA and ESA, and the target of this mission is the Didymos moon that is an asteroid, and in this case this mission will follow the DART NASA mission, and will have the target to look at the impact of the DART mission and to study the asteroids. Another important contribution of OHB Italy to the exploration, and in this case also to potential lunar mission, is the development of an electrical transfer service module that will be installed on board as the upper stage of Vega. And this service module has the main target to perform in-orbit service, orbit transfer, and also to perform a transfer for lunar mission, payload, and satellite. Coming to the research, in-situ research utilization, a lot of speakers has spoken concerning the potential transformation of the regolith in oxygen and water, and OHB Italy is one of the main actors in Europe, having developed with the contribution of the Politecnico di Milano a laboratory demonstrator able, and we have demonstrated it, to produce water from the sample of terrestrial regolith. So we are ready to start a realization phase, an implementation phase, to move from the laboratory to a real payload to be launched with the next European lander. As a final contribution to this seminar, I would like to mention an important activities of OHB Italy in the ground, for the ground telescope. This telescope has been developed both for two different applications, space situational awareness and space surveillance and tracking. And can provide an important contribution to the exploration, and also to how we can look at the space debris. This telescope that has been already produced and will be installed in Matera TASI center next year, is able to detect space debris with a diameter of 8 centimeters at 1,000 kilometers. And with another particular application for space situational awareness, is able to monitor asteroids rushing towards the Earth, and with a 1 week, or also space debris, with at least 1 week in advance with respect to where nearing the Earth. So in this case, it's an important contribution to the space situational awareness. Okay, I have finished my presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Engineer Stanghini, also to respect time. So I will hope that we will have some minutes at the end for a short roundtable. So I hope at the end to have time for some questions to our speaker. Thank you so much again, Engineer Stanghini. The next is from Argotec, Engineer Alessandro Balossino. The title is Small System for the Exploration and Exploitation of the Solar System, Microsatellites and New Technologies for the Next Generation of Communication and Navigation Service in Deep Space. Please, Sino, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation first. I'll try to share my screen, just give me a sec.
Yes, you are co-host, so I think that you can.
Okay, I think you can see the screen. So as you have anticipated, my talk is going to be focused on what we are doing to allow the exploration and exploitation of the solar system by using small systems, which is our core business. So I'll start with a very short introduction of Argotec. We are an aerospace company based in Turin. And we have branches operating in Europe, for ESA in Germany and in the Netherlands, and as well a subsidiary in the United States. We work on two main pillars. The first one is producing products for the wellness of astronauts and the space explorers. And the second main business area is development of small satellites that have high reliability levels and that can operate in deep space. We work with a number of partners and customers, so we work with all the main space agencies in the world and as well with private companies. So our heritage for deep space system comes mostly from two missions that we are currently developing. Both missions are made in cooperation between TASI and NASA, and in both missions we are using our proprietary platform to explore the deep space. So the first satellite called Argomoon is going to be launched in the frame of Artemis 1, and will take pictures of the second stage of SLS, the new launcher developed by NASA, while the second one is called LiCheCube, and it will be launched this year as a secondary payload of the DART spacecraft by NASA. So that will impact an asteroid to deviate it, and so our satellite will take pictures of the impact and send data back to Earth. So that the key point of these two satellites for our perspective is developing something which is very, very compact and that can operate very far from Earth with very high reliability levels and with a very high autonomy level, because we cannot operate it from here. So as I said, today the main focus of my talk is going to be about communication and navigation. So currently we see that for operating any asset in deep space, it's very complicated, because we need a very big and expensive infrastructure on ground. The communication is scheduled, and so we have constraints for accessing the spacecraft. The data rates are slow, and there isn't a commercial service. So what we're trying to do is leveraging on the experience that we have gained in the development of small systems for deep space to help build the next generation of the next communication and navigation services for deep space. So our vision is, as I said, is to use small satellites for doing that, because these platforms have a very good level of flexibility and low cost, but at the same time there are a number of challenges, because we have to deal with the limited mass volume. And in general, we do not have the possibility of having many redundancies, so we have to develop new systems that have a very high reliability level. So to make the new generation of communication and navigation in deep space possible with this technology, we are working on three main areas. The first one is a constellation of microsatellites to provide communication and navigation for the Moon and Mars. The second area is the development of user terminals for the users. And the third part is the development of brand new technologies that can help to communicate and navigate in deep space. So I'll start talking about the Moon and what we are doing in this field. So what we are doing now is we are working on two main areas. The first one is, as I said, the constellation of microsatellites for communicating with the Moon. So the idea is having an infrastructure that works as a relay system for the users on the Moon, and that makes everything way easier than now. The second area on which we are working in is microsatellites as part of a bigger communication and navigation infrastructure. So in this case, we are integrating other infrastructures that are being planned and implemented by some of our partners. And the third area is the development on the end-to-end telecommunication system. So we are working to provide a turnkey system that greatly simplifies the work that has to do the final user, and that works a bit like what the communication that we have here on Earth, where you can just grab your cell phone and communicate. So I'll focus now on what we're doing for what concerns the microsatellite constellation. So the idea is having multiple satellites orbiting around the moon to cover the whole surface and the lower orbits. And these constellations that we are studying, supported by the European Space Agency and the Italian Space Agency, is compatible with the roadmap that has been defined at international level by the agency. And it can provide a communication speed up to tens of megabits per second, which, just to give you an order of magnitude, allows for the broadcasting, the streaming of a video in HD. And what we are doing is having a very aggressive development timeline. So we are hoping to have our first demo mission in 2024, 2025. And the final system will be composed of 24 satellites, each one having a mass smaller than 55 kilograms. We are applying the same concept that I just mentioned, so the utilization of small satellites for providing this kind of service, also for Mars. And so we have an ongoing study with the European Space Agency for defining a constellation that allows communication and navigation infrastructure at Mars with small satellites a bit bigger than the other ones. So in this case, with a mass smaller than 70 kilograms. Also, in this case, we are targeting a transmission speed in the orders of 9 megabits per second. And in this case, we also have a navigation capability that allows the user to know their position with an accuracy better than 10 meters. Aside of these mission level studies that we're doing, we are also developing some pieces of hardware. And the first element on which we are working is a deep space radio. So we are developing a very compact radio that is one of the building block of the user terminal. So imagine that we build this very big and expensive infrastructure in deep space, but the user don't have a proper receiver or a proper system for communicating. So we are also working in this area. So what we are trying to do is developing a system that is very compact and that is compatible with the small spacecraft, that is compatible with the infrastructure that are being developed, and that can serve a number of different users. This device has a number of advanced features to being able to provide a service as close to what I said before, so to a system that is as similar as possible to what we have here on Earth. And we are developing this system together with the Politecnico di Torino, and as well another small industry located here in the Turin area. Finally, we are not just working on new missions or new concept or new hardware, but we are also developing new technologies. So we have just started a new study to develop a system for the navigation in deep space, because again, knowing the location of your assets when you're far from Earth is not easy, and it's very expensive and it requires a lot of resources from Earth. So what we are studying together with the University La Sapienza is to use a system that exploits the analysis of the intersatellite link between different satellites that are orbiting, for example, Mars, but also the Moon, and advanced Olby prediction algorithms, so that a constellation, or in general, a cluster of space assets can determine autonomously its position in space. So the idea behind this concept is that we can greatly simplify the need that we have to work here from Earth to locate the spacecraft in deep space. So just to summarize very quickly, we believe that to fully unleash the potential for the exploration and the exploitation of the solar system, and to being able to build all these very nice infrastructures that we have just seen, we need a new paradigm for communication and navigation services. And we are working very hard to having small satellites in these new infrastructures, because we believe that these satellites have a niche for implementing this service, which that can be very helpful for creating competitive services, since given their flexibility and the low cost. And finally, we are working very hard for developing not just mission concepts, but also hardware and new technology for making possible to communicate easily with the Moon and Mars as soon as 2024. So this is my last slide. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Engineer Balossino, again for a good timing. You respected well. Thank you for the presentation, very interesting. So I hope to discuss at the end. So thank you again. The next speaker, the next presentation from Telespazio, the company name, and from Engineer Cohen-Gertz. The title is The Role of Connectivity and Navigation Service in the Future Space Resource Industry. Please, Engineer Gertz. I think that, oh, okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Share my screen.
Okay, we see it.
Okay.
Nice.
So first of all, thank you for hosting this event and for allowing the opportunity for Telespazio and myself to spend 10 minutes on our view of connectivity and navigation services in the future of not only the space resources industry, but exploration in general, of course. It nicely complements, I think, the presentation that was just done now before me. I'm working for Telespazio as the program manager for the Moonlight Lunar Communication and Navigation Service, which is a phase AB1 study that we're currently involved in, and that I will briefly touch upon at the end of my talk. So in general, if I look at connectivity and look at the resources industries, and look at what is happening on Earth, Industry 4.0, connectivity overall has really powered the industrial 4.0 revolution and enabled industries, many of them really to become data-driven. If I would look at the classical mining industry on Earth, and of course with the objective of the parallels to the space resources industry, I see there how connectivity and Internet of Things have led to several advantages. For example, cost savings. So currently autonomous vehicles, autonomous drilling systems have eliminated to a large extent the need for human involvement, and through that, of course, cost savings. Predictive maintenance, because of machines equipped with sensors that are mapping wear and tear, tracking basically the activities of the machines 24/7, will allow basically the engineers to conduct predictive maintenance, reducing unexpected fallout times, improve safety coming from monitoring, example, mining shafts, early detection of changes that is happening to the infrastructures or to the surface, allows them to react quickly or even prematurely before accidents happen. Space resource extraction, on the other hand, is even more complex. It's extremely complex due to the high degree of autonomy required and the limited ability to facilitate quick human intervention when necessary. So the reliance of the industries, the companies, and the countries that are going to build up, for example, space resources industry to facilitate and to fuel also space architecture, are going to rely on many sensors, cameras, data, and that will be crucial for their decision taking. You can already see now that in not so much the exploration domain, but the Earth observation domain, space startups are already exploring Industry 4.0 technologies in space. So IoT, automation of satellites, small satellites, you have big data, you have cloud computing, all being brought to space. So why am I taking a bit of a step back, and instead of focusing on space, I'm talking a bit about Earth? Well, in my view, and in Telespazio view, space resource extraction is expected to really heavily rely on a network of interconnected assets for three key reasons, but not limited to these. On one hand, the digitalization of the space industry is happening already now and will be the norm 10 to 20 years from now. So when we're really seeing an evolving, for example, space mining industry, let's say 10 years down the road from now, digitalization is really the norm. Complex coordination and logistics of all the assets involved, so basically assets on the surface, miners, assets that are transferring the material from one place to another, but also satellites that are flying around for observation, will need to rely heavily on connectivity. And of course, any human involvement, so whenever you're having astronauts in space, on the surface of the moon, on the surface of, let's say, asteroids, that will be accompanied with the need for continuous and very reliable communication. So these connected assets will include the full envelope of human and or robotic surface, orbiter, habitat, base, transfer vehicle, Earth Control Center assets. And that really illustrates the need and the necessity of a very robust and versatile connectivity infrastructure that needs to be set up. There are also, of course, much more, let's say, down-to-earth reasons why connectivity will play a key role in exploration, and particularly human exploration. That's because connectivity and communication is essential for fostering basically the emotional aspects associated with long-term permanent exploration of extraterrestrial bodies. We're focusing always a lot on the technology and the engineering behind it, but there's also very, let's say, human needs behind it. Oh, that was one too much. If I'm moving a bit more towards the navigation aspect, because we're talking about both communication and navigation, large-scale exploration and exploitation of extraterrestrial bodies, such as the moon, will greatly benefit from advanced navigation services. Reduced complexity of the transfer, orbiter, surface assets is one key aspect, basically reducing the technical complexity of a lander, which currently needs to bring all the sensors and all the cameras and all the intelligence with it on board in order to determine, for example, the position with respect to a surface on the location and the distance with respect to the surface of the moon. If there is a more advanced navigation infrastructure available, these landers will become more simple because they don't need to do all that calculation and computation on board, but they can rely on the direct navigation and PNT information that is provided via the infrastructure. Of course, increased safety when exploring new areas. If either a rover, a robot, or an astronaut is going to explore new areas, for example, on the surface of the moon, navigation will be key in order to understand where you are, but also to transfer your position to, for example, your colleagues that are in the habitat or the ground control segment on Earth. And of course, navigation and coordination between different assets, for example, a miner on the surface and let's say a truck or transportation vehicle bringing or taking away material will be much, much easier when there is a reliable navigation service available. So navigation services will really help to build and foster and accelerate the lunar economy. However, they have a less obvious business model, of course, compared with connectivity and communication, especially in the early phases of the lunar economy. I'm focusing today a lot about lunar economy because that is also where we are currently focusing on most. However, there's of course again also here a bit more of a less technical aspect. If you're considering that humans in very early phases will be driving around on the moon again, exploring new areas, and the moon not having any artificial landmarks at the moment, any buildings, etc., and having a very homogeneous landscape, navigation will also be very important for the astronauts. And driving on the surface, for example, because it will be very easy to get disoriented if you are going away too far. So comparing it with driving your car around in an area or a country where you don't know the streets, it is very important to have a reliable navigation device with you. Also rovers, robots used as 3D printers, building the first infrastructures that will be necessary. It will be, in our view, also very an advantage to have a navigation service available, because it will also there relax basically the constraints that are placed on these assets. And of course, search and rescue. If at some point something happens, it is very important that you can signal home where you are so that the appropriate measures can be taken. Coming a bit more to Moonlight LCNS, so Lunar Communication and Navigation Services. That is a current project that is kicked off recently, a few weeks ago only, under a prime ship of Telespazio, building a consortium with several other partners. One of them is, of course, Argotec, that presented before me, where we're trying to build a complementary system based on let's say more complex big satellites, but also leveraging on the advantages and the speed of smaller satellites. And this is driven by the European Space Agency, which has a vision where Europe is going to be in a leadership role, building an essential infrastructure for the development of a lunar economy over the coming years, over the coming decade, providing standardized and commercial communication and navigation services. A key aspect of that is that from the beginning, the outset is to set this up via a public-private partnership. So industry to co-invest into this commercial service, and that is what we're currently studying, how such connectivity and navigation services meet the market, meet this developing lunar market, and how to develop pricing models associated with it, such that a viable solution can be proposed. Clearly, although initially relying on governmental investments into moon exploration, you can look at the example that NASA has taken, where they are basically procuring transportation services from a set of different companies that have built landers that can bring payloads to the surface of the moon. And NASA is really just telling them what kind of payload they want to bring to what kind of location, and then have the companies provide that service. This is, of course, still governmentally, let's say, funded, but it helps creating this economy, because the companies, of course, sell any, let's say, leftover or spare capacity that they're bringing to the surface of the moon to other partners, other companies that are willing and have an interest and an ability to pay for it. So although it will initially rely on the governmental investments, the expectation is that in the next 10, maximum 15 years, these kind of solutions will become self-sustainable. And that is also the reason why to start from the beginning with the PPP concept. The study and the solution design is ongoing, but basically what the envisaged solution in the next years is, so that needs to be, of course, scaled up. But the final solution will be a big combination of assets located on the surface of the Earth, so ground terminals, navigation satellites, for example, Galileo, and communication satellites flying in Earth orbit, and that are then interconnected with an envelope of flying assets and ground assets in the lunar environment. So lunar communication and navigation satellites flying in a network of different orbits, but also ground assets that enhance, for example, the position signals or provide different kind of local connectivity infrastructures. And the combination of bigger and smaller satellites is foreseen there, in particular during the ramp up of this kind of service deployment, where, of course, in the beginning, smaller satellites have the advantage to be able to be deployed faster. So to close my 10 minutes, a few closing remarks from my side. Oh, that was too quick. I need to move something here. The lunar economy will happen, and the question is how, and in particular the European question is how to best leverage public and private models, creating win-wins in order to fuel this. Essential infrastructures such as communication and navigation will help accelerate the creation of a lunar economy because they will reduce the need of investment of companies that are, for example, building transportation services. And this together will help support a sustained and viable space resources industry as well. And of course, Telespazio in particular on this moonlight study is not doing it alone, but it's leading a consortium of several companies that you see at the bottom, and two of them have also spoken earlier here. So with that, I would close my 10 minutes talk.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. Very interesting topic related to the navigation and digitalization and the new phase for the industry 4.0 for space. Thank you so much, Cohen. We are a little bit late. The next from Thales Alenia Space Italia, engineer Maria Antonietta Perino with Deep Space Habitats.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I also need to share my screen, if possible.
Yes, you are sharing.
Okay, so it's very late. I will try just to share with you the enthusiasm we have every day here in Thales Alenia Space in Torino regarding exploration, and in particular exploration involving people. So let me just spend a few words about our reality. We develop satellites and spacecraft for any possible orbit and for any possible use, from the communication to observation to navigation to exploration and science. In 15 different sites, we are more than 8,000 people. In particular, exploration and science is what we do here in Torino. So Italy, I believe, we should be really proud that we can say that Italy has something to say concerning human exploration in space. And in fact, we have developed this capability working for more than 20 years to develop the International Space Station. Previous speaker, Valentina, mentioned that, in fact, this is a beautiful architectural and scientific projects that we all realize together. So it's really natural to move from low Earth orbit and export our capabilities to the moon first, to the asteroids, and then soon we hope to Mars. And we are going to do that in a sort of incremental way, starting with robotic exploration that is ongoing, to outpost development that is going to occur in the next few years, and finally moving to more demanding surface infrastructure as we saw before. I don't want to take your time in summarizing what the space station is, but let's say that in the last 20 years, we contributed to the pressurized volume. Our company, Thales Alenia Space, contributed to the pressurized volume of the space station in an important way. More than 50% of it was built here in Torino. And we are proud to say that out of the 135 shuttle flights, 63 carried on board either payload or modules that we develop. As for the moon exploration, in partnership with Airbus, we contribute to the development of the new transportation system, Orion, that will bring the first new astronauts to the lunar surface in the next 2 or 3 years. As far as the habitats are concerned, proud to say that our company has been selected to design and realize the pressurized structure of the first module that will host the visiting crew to the small space station that will orbit the moon, and as the continuation of the incremental development of the Gateway, we have recently been assigned the prime constructorship for the international habitat. So here in Torino, we lead this activity, and our colleague in France got the contract to design and realize the ESRIC module that will provide the communication, refueling, and the logistic to the space station orbiting around the moon. So tonight, given the short time, I like to focus on how we approach the design of the new modules for the deep space application. You see here a rendering of the internal layout. Basically, look at this picture, how we cannot fall in love with this. Basically, we have really to, starting from the experience we developed for the space station, in fact, we have to refocus our attention for the design of the habitat for deep space by really placing the human being in the center of our design solution. So we really need to develop smart solutions that we will validate in orbit around the moon and then export on the lunar surface and then on Mars. Just to show you the typical internal layout of a module of the International Space Station, for sure we cannot offer the astronaut that will spend, months or years in this space. We cannot offer an internal layout like this one. It's really impossible, and so we have to how can I say, leverage on the fact that we have new advanced technologies like 3D printing, like lightweight possible structure and materials that we can develop, and we should really be able to offer the astronaut a pleasant habitat where they can reshape also part of the internal volume. So it's not only psychological well-being need, but it's also technical need to protect the astronaut from the harsh external environment. Just to mention one problem, the radiation protection. Let me share with you some concepts. In fact, those are not only concepts. We are really designing and realizing this type of water walls. So we are using water, for example, to provide the radiation protection for the modules in orbit around the moon or in transit to Mars. For the surface infrastructure, in addition to the habitat, we are busy dealing and designing other elements like the lander that will be an important asset that ESA, for example, is going to contribute to the overall infrastructure for the lunar exploration. Habitat, not only rigid, but also inflatable. In the next slide, I will show you some concept. We work on in-situ resource utilization. We design and realize a pressurized rover that we consider a really strategic element of the surface infrastructure. And the colleague just before me mentioned how important will be to provide the lunar infrastructure with a sound telecommunication and navigation capability. This is the concept I mentioned before. We realize an inflatable habitat that can be launched in how can I say, a lock configuration and then deploy when needed. That will allow us to save about 40% packaging at launch, so very important. In the picture here, we show how important will be either to bury the module or in any case to cover it with the local regolith. This is the concept of the pressurized rover that really turned out to be a mock-up full of beautiful technologies, electric wheels, each of them steerable independently from the others, an inflatable airlock, many, how can I say, key technologies that we develop also thanks to, how can I say, a very fruitful support of the local Piemonte region. So that was a co-founded program a few years ago. Somebody mentioned before how important will be to provide green support to the crew, not only for the life support system, but also for psychological aspect. We were recently involved in an important international project, Eden. We carried to Antarctica small modules that was used to grow food for part of the crew there. And we have also surfaced greenhouses design activity in collaboration, for example, with the University of Arizona. So many challenges, reduced gravity, lack of atmosphere, cosmic radiation impacting the infrastructure. We all know that the regolith is not an easy fellow, it's very abrasive. So we need to learn how to work with regolith. It was mentioned before also from, how can I say, a temperature point of view, an illumination point of view, different criticalities to be solved, but altogether we'll be able to manage that. So this is a rendering by Foster and Partners of 2 or 3 years ago. Very proud to say that we started many years before, and this was one of our first moon-based concept that is still shown in Chicago. So this is just to share with you the fact that we have been working on habitat and possible architecture for Moon and Mars exploration for the last 20 years. And with that, I'm ready to take, if we can carry on the discussion, any possible question you may have. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you really so much, Engineer Perino, for this fascinating presentation and for to give us some remarks about the beautiful work of Thales Alenia Space. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The next, of course, the last but not the least in our list of main companies that devote their work to this fascinating topic of space architecture is from Maana Electric, engineer
Good evening.
Luca Celiento. The title is ISRU, Supporting Lunar Infrastructure.
Yeah, so thank you so much for inviting Maana Electric to this interesting workshop. And I'm quite proud to, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, very well.
Yes, and if you can please make me co-host because I cannot share my screen.
I think that you are. Try it.
Okay, now it should be fine.
Nice.
Okay, so yeah, so as I was saying, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm quite honored to represent Maana in this workshop. Today, we'll try briefly to explain you what is Maana's vision on how in-situ resource utilization can support initially lunar infrastructure, but in the long term also Mars exploration and colonization. Maana is a relatively small company. We started here in Luxembourg in 2018. In the last 3 years, basically, we grow a lot as a company. And right now we are about 39 employees. 90% is a technical team and engineering team. And we are mainly specialized in in-situ resource utilization. But besides that, we also have many other expertise. And we are all condensating them together in some interesting projects that I will show you in a few minutes. Many of you mentioned what are the next plans for moon exploration and colonization. And we are all excited about what is going to happen in the next future. People like me that are not of the generation who saw the men stepping on the moon are very, very excited of what can be our very close future. But let's have a look to what are the potential mission scenarios that we are going to face in the next future. So the International Space Exploration Coordination Group proposed 3 types of exploration mission scenarios, and each of them has a specific characteristics. So the sortie mission, the so-called sortie mission, will be a relatively short mission with some landing crew that will serve as a let's say, habitat, temporary habitat for the astronauts, for the crew, and there will be some landing modules, landing vehicles, and mainly the first missions will be about preparing what is going to happen later. What is going to happen later is basically a more kind of extended lifetime mission, something like what is happening right now with the International Space Station. So astronauts on the moon working in, let's say, working on scientific or development projects on a permanent base that and with missions that could last about 6 months, and then after 6 months there is turnover of astronauts and so on. But what is the long-term vision? Long-term vision is something like this, and I like the idea. I like the fact that many people, many speakers talked about this project from Skidmore, Howing, and Merrill. And I like this picture because it actually shows exactly what is going to happen in the future, regardless of the technologies, regardless of how we are going to build these things. This picture shows exactly what we actually need. What we need is to define and develop and build infrastructures which are the key point for a proper development of what we want to actually achieve. It's a word that honestly I did not hear so many times in this presentation. I wanted to hear much more. Sustainability, which is the key point for the future developments and the future colonization of the moon and the other planets. But when I ask to experts, what are, in your opinion, the things that we should build first on the moon? The answers are usually landing pads, because otherwise we cannot establish a supply chain between Earth and moon. Sure, habitats. Of course, human beings are not yet ready for living on a harsh environment like the lunar soil, the lunar ground. But and roads, because in the end we are going there for exploring the moon or other planets. But nobody, or at least not enough people, are actually focusing on what is the way we can provide sustainable form of power on the moon. And if you look at literature, power is actually the real showstopper for any kind of activity that we may perform on the in the future on the moon or any other planet we want to colonize. And all people are they all agree that we need at least 1 megawatt of power for the basic needs. And now most of the speakers and all the experts of that are putting their focus, their spotlight on the moon, they believe that ISRU is the real game changer. Why? Because with ISRU we can potentially produce, let's say, support the development directly from the moon without depending from the Earth supply chain. But ISRU requires a lot of power. Initially, we are talking about a few kilowatts, but as long as we progress and we extend our presence on the moon, we need megawatts and potentially also gigawatts. But ISRU can also be the way we can produce power. And actually, this is the strategy that Maana, my company, is pursuing for establishing a sustainable way for mankind to produce energy on the moon to sustain the development of moon base, moon village, moon colonies, and so on. Right now, we are first developing a product that we call TerraBox, and this TerraBox, we should have the first prototype of the system able to operate in 10 months. And we expect to have a system that is capable of using in-situ resources on Earth, specifically desert sand, to produce solar panels. And we are already developing a preliminary design of what is going to be then the lunar version of this TerraBox that we call LunaBox. And we are developing also small payload demonstrator to prove that the technologies that we are effectively using now on Earth can be also applied for moon. And what would be next step then? Once we have the LunaBox, the next step is just Mars and other celestial bodies. And this is a graphical depiction of how we imagine the LunaBox. The LunaBox will be just a big payload. We send it on the moon, it lands, and then we start mining regolith, and from regolith we can obtain all the constituents and materials we need for producing solar panels. And what we expect to achieve with this LunaBox is basically to produce 1 megawatt solar capability per year. And this is already something that we can do with the TerraBox. We expect to have a lifetime of each LunaBox of 10 years. So basically, we can produce in 10 years 10 megawatts of power and fulfill most of the needs for the 10 years development of the lunar base. As a byproduct, we can also produce oxygen because the technologies that we are right now using are also capable of producing oxygen. Of course, working in a remote location, like the desert, we are implementing fully automated operations and remote controlled operation. And the same will happen also for the LunaBox. And as I said, our timeline is quite aggressive. We aim to have the first lunar payload by 2024. And we are already designing it and we should be capable of, let's say, ready for launch in 2024. But the LunaBox should be ready by 2030. But once you solve the problem of the energy source, the power source, of course, you just did, let's say, half of your job. Because then you need also to define the proper infrastructure to connect this energy source to the habitats, the village, and so on. So the main point is that you can use also ISRU for producing, for instance, wires and connectors with a potentially infinite range of products, not only related to low voltage or low current, but you can potentially also produce transformers or power storage systems. And ISRU, in conjunction with 3D printing technologies, you can actually have a huge potential for growth in time. And another aspect I would like to highlight is the standardization. Just to make an example, think about what the CubeSat paradigm made for space in the last 10, 15 years. Just creating a kind of standardized way of sending satellites in space allowed more engagement for the space community, from universities, from small companies, and it also engaged emerging countries. The problem with the standardization is something that probably should be solved sooner rather than later. Why? Because now we are designing habitats, we are designing a way, like we are planning infrastructures on the moon. We are, let's say, all aiming to reach the moon as soon as possible, but it's a kind of individual effort from space agencies. But if we already a common standard or something that is already agreed from the space community, by the space community, this can really boost what is going to happen from the 2030 on. And at Maana, what we are doing right now is also to try to solve one of the biggest issues for the, let's say, the power infrastructure, which is the let's say, harshness of working with the lunar regolith. Many of you mentioned that it's a very, let's say, aggressive element that we have to deal with. And one of the things that we are developing is a plug socket system, which is dust tolerant, and it allows to work also in presence of very fine dust. And on the other hand, we also are developing in parallel with this project a kind of standards, a unification of the standards for power elements that we want then to share with the scientific community, and then start from this to design the future of the lunar colonization. So I finally leave you just a few recommendations as a, let's say, industry to the space architects. We have many talks with some architecture firms and studios, and what we see is that sometimes there is a lot of work and a lot of effort in designing something that could work on the moon, but some solutions are not really technically viable. So still in this, let's say, perspective of creating engagement and synergies, it's, I think, Maana's recommendation to be open to create this kind of engagement and synergies between maybe space industries and space architects, because this can really create the base for technical solutions that could be actually applied on the moon and Mars. Then the designs should be compatible with all kinds of assets. So if Maana or any other company is able to provide a way, a solution for power on the moon, the designs should be already open to be compatible with these assets. And finally, the design should be as much flexible as possible, because now we are many technologies, and ISRU is an example, but in the next 10 years, we can be able to potentially produce, to introduce emerging technologies that can really change, they can be really the new game changer, and then maybe some designs can be obsolete. So the real recommendation is to make the design as flexible, as much flexible as possible. Otherwise, they can be just a very nice picture, but very far to be implemented on the moon. So in the, let's say, this vision of creating synergies, here is my contact. Feel free to contact me whenever you feel you have a good idea to share. We are always open to create collaborations with the academia, with the space industry, and this is a right opportunity for us to share our willingness with you. So thank you so much. And as usual, I know that it's very late, but if you have any question, I'm here available for you. Thank you again.
Well, thank you so much, Luca, for your presentation. Very deep, very complete. Is very interesting when the company and the industrial world can give to the designers recommendation. It means that there is really a co-work on the topic. So I know that we are in late. I know that we are near to 8 p.m. But if somebody want to ask something to our speakers about the presentation, I think that we can give us also 5 minutes. So are there any questions about the presentation, about the very important topic that we have seen? Somebody? I think that this last session about the main research and main works of the company are very interesting, because I observed two main arguments, two main topics. One related to the possibility to increase the connection, the navigation, the connectivity, the management of data that we need to try to implement a new habitat on extraterrestrial surface, and the other, the possibility to give the power supply and the energy that are useful and are necessary to build this new construction, this new technology. So is very important, in my opinion, this day, because thanks to Italian Embassy, this day gave us the possibility to create possibly a link between the research and the research of the company, because of course all the arguments that we observed is the future, or is like the future, is the research of the future. In the last presentation, I observed that this will be done in the next 10 years. This will be done in the next 15 years. So we are at the cutting edge of the research in this argument. So if there are some questions, any question for our speakers? You can see in the chat, if you want, the email of some of the speaker, for example, Professoressa Sumini, that is giving the email. But I think that the organization of the embassy will give to us all the reference to make a question or create a link. So if you have not any question, I wanted to thank you again all for your participation. I want to thank again the Italian Embassy. I want to thank the ambassador, Diego Brasioli. I want to thank for the organization, Dottoressa Mancarella. I want to thank Pelosi, Rector Cupertino, Rector Saracco, Director Sala, from ESA, the engineer Sabattini, from ASI, Danilo Rubini, Marco Di Clemente, Alessandro Gabrielli, from LSA, Matthias Link, of course. All the speakers for what concern the session devoted to the research, Professor Farlacala, Vittorio Netti, Professoressa Somini, Professor Marano, and also from the Université du Luxembourg, Antonino Salmeri. Thank you, Antonino. And also, of course, for the last session, again, I want to thanks from the OHB Italia, Marco Stanghini, from Argotec, Engineer Balossino, from Telespazio, Engineer Cohen Gertz, from Thales Alenia Space Italia, Engineer Maria Antonietta Perino, and from Maana Electric, Engineer Luca Celiento. So thank you so much again, and have a nice evening, and see you and keep in touch.